Bella and the Moonlight Balloon Ride. Bella brushed her teeth, put on blue pajamas, and hugged her patched teddy tight. Outside her moon-shaped window, a soft silver glow winked. Bella rubbed her eyes and tiptoed closer. There, tied to the garden fence, floated a big round balloon that looked exactly like the moon. It shimmered with tiny stars. Bella giggled. She had never seen a moon that came all the way down to visit. The night smelled of warm apples and sleepy grass. The balloon whispered in a voice like soft chiming bells, "Would you like to come for a tiny ride?" Bella's eyes grew round and bright. She climbed down the garden path, Teddy tucked under her arm. A friendly little moon face named Luna floated beside the balloon and waved. Luna hummed a lullaby that made the leaves sway like sleepier hands. Bella nodded, and the wicker basket waited with a ribbon bow. The balloon smelled faintly of starlight and lemon cookies. The basket rose slowly, like a sleepy feather letting go. Bella felt her toes tingle. Down below, her little red-doored house waved its curtains. Up, the sky tucked itself in with clouds like cotton blankets. Luna pointed with a tiny crescent finger and whispered stories about twinkling friends. The fireflies blinked hello and lit a tiny path through the night. Bella waved to the house and felt brave and small all at once. Teddy snuggled closer, as if listening. They floated past sleepy trees where an owl with round glasses blinked and hooted a friendly hello. "Good evening," the owl said, sounding like a page turning. He offered a tiny feather for balance, just in case. Bella thanked him with a polite curtsy, and the owl winked. The fireflies danced in a gentle ring, as if clapping. A silver cloud below became a soft seat, and Bella set Teddy down to wave at the twinkling lights. The world sounded like a soft song. Luna pointed to a string of tiny stars that twinkled like hopping beetles. "They sing when you listen," Luna said. Bella pressed her ear to the cool night and heard soft jingles that made her toes wiggle. The stars hummed a lullaby about moonbeams and marshmallows. Little star shapes winked and drifted close, making silly patterns that looked like dancing socks and laughing moons. Bella giggled so much she nearly dropped Teddy, but the basket kept them snug and safe. They landed on a cloud cushion as fluffy as freshly baked bread. Bella clapped her hands and jumped a little, finding the cloud a perfect pillow. The fireflies made a tiny campfire of light while Luna told a quiet story about a moon who learned to paint shadows. Bella shared a crumb of pretend cookie with Teddy. Even the clouds seemed to hug the basket. The night felt like a hug you could float inside, warm, safe, and snugly wrapped in silver blue cotton. Suddenly, a breeze whooshed by with playful fingers and the balloon bobbed like a small boat on gentle waves. Bella's heart did a funny flip. "Hold on," Luna hummed, steady and warm. The fireflies blinked faster as if cheering. Bella hugged Teddy extra tight and felt the basket sway, but the moonlight balloon hummed steady like a lullaby. The owl below watched with wise eyes. Bella practiced a brave breath, one slow in, one slow out, and the whoosh turned into a ticklish giggle. A tiny gust gusted again, a little stronger, and the basket dipped toward a silver cloud valley. Bella's tummy fluttered like a jar of butterflies. "We can sing to steady the sky," Luna suggested with a sparkle. Bella sang a silly song about socks on the moon while Teddy hummed in his soft, bare way. The stars joined in with twinkly beeps, and the owl added a gentle hoot. The balloon steadied. Bella realized that singing with friends made big feelings shrink like tiny paper boats. Higher and higher they floated again, toward a ring of dancing stars that shaped themselves into a smiling playground. Bella squealed with delight as tiny star children spun like pinwheels. Luna taught Bella a star handshake that felt like warm tinsel. Bella felt brave and bright, and Teddy felt brave too. They hopped from one glowing pebble of light to another, counting in whispers. The night air smelled like vanilla and rainbows. Bella felt like the tallest small person in the whole wide sky. The moon itself leaned close and whispered secrets of the sky, stories about sleepy seas and marching comets. Luna hummed them back in a melody Bella could almost taste. Bella listened with wide eyes, and a tiny bead of wonder ran down her cheek, like a morning dew. She learned that the moon loved to visit small children who kept brave, kind hearts. Bella promised quietly to always remember how the sky felt. The balloon rocked gently, as if nodding in agreement. Just as Bella thought the night couldn't feel any more magical, the wind sang louder and swirled a little faster. The basket spun a tiny turn and Bella laughed, surprised and brave. "Hold my paw," Teddy seemed to say. Bella took Daddy Bear grip on the basket rope and Luna wrapped a ribbon of moonlight around the tether. The owl called encouragement from below. The gust was big but friendly, like a playful giant. Bella shouted with joy as they zoomed through a silver hoop of cloud. They soared past a sleepy comet who nodded politely and waved its tail like a ribbon. Bella felt a whoop of bravery inside her chest and knew she could do anything, even when the sky surprised her. The Moonlight balloon hummed a steady, warm tune that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The stars around them blinked in rhythmic patterns, like a friendly drumbeat. Bella closed her eyes and hummed back, feeling the song wrap around her like a cozy scarf. She was home in the sky. As the night grew quieter, the balloon turned homeward, guided by a tiny tug from Luna. Bella peered down and saw her house like a toy, curtains waving goodnight. The basket drifted lower and the cloud blankets folded up behind like tidy sleeping quilts. The fireflies lit the path all the way to Bella's garden gate. Bella thought of the owl, the singing stars, and the giggling gust. She yawned a velvet yawn, and Teddy yawned back with the comfiest stuffed mouth. Back at her window, Bella climbed down the garden path with the basket safely touching the grass. The Moonlight balloon gave a gentle wink, and Luna pressed a tiny moonbeam into Bella's palm as a promise to visit again. Bella tucked Teddy under her arm and walked inside, her slippers making quiet pats on the floor. Her house smelled like honey toast. The balloon floated up again, waving goodbye with its ribbons. Bella waved until the moon was a small silver speck smiling high above. Bella climbed into bed and placed the moonbeam on her bedside table. It glowed softly, a little nightlight that smelled of moon mint. She hugged Teddy, who seemed a bit braver now. Her eyes grew heavy like soft curtains. From outside, Luna hummed the last line of their song and the stars replied with tiny wink bursts. Bella smiled in her sleep before she even fell completely, and in her dreams she rode the silver balloon again, this time with all her new friends waving hello. Morning painted the curtains with pale sun, and Bella woke with a good sleepy stretch and a memory that felt like a warm blanket. On the table, the moonbeam had dimmed to a cozy glow, a tiny treasure. Bella whispered, "Thank you" to the window and to the day. She knew the balloon would visit again, because the sky keeps its promises to kind, brave hearts. Teddy winked his stitched smile, and Bella decided that every night could hold a little adventure if you listened closely. That night, Bella left the window slightly open, and a single ribbon from the garden fence fluttered in, like a tiny hello. She fell asleep humming the Star Handshake song and dreamed of moonlit playgrounds, singing comets, and an owl who told wise jokes. She slept curled like a tiny crescent, and if you looked out very, very quietly, you might see a small silver wink high above, as if Luna was peeking in to check on her. Bella smiled in her sleep and hugged the world a little closer. The day the toys came alive. Night folded like a soft blanket over Leela's room. The moon outside touched the curtains with silver fingers, and a small lamp hummed sleep songs. Leela curled up, hugged Teddy the bear close, and sighed a slow, content sigh. On the shelf, Rocket Car rested on its ramp, the wooden train waited on invisible tracks, and the music box sat ready with its tiny tune wound up. The room was quiet and sweet. Then, just as a star blinked twice, the toys stirred and opened bright little eyes. Teddy stretched button arms and whispered, "SHH, tonight we tiptoe." Rocket Car revved, tiny sound like a giggle. Patch Cat Plush blinked both button eyes and twitched its embroidered tail as though it were ready to pounce on a moonbeam. Puzzle blocks wobbled together to make a tiny stage. The music box opened one careful note that floated like a feather. Everyone smiled a little because they had a gentle plan: to play a secret, small show for their friend Leela while she slept on and dreamed. They began with a parade. Rocket Car zipped a soft loop, leaving a line of little laughter sounds. The wooden train chugged along an imagined track, choo-chooing in tiny, polite bursts. Puzzle blocks tumbled into letter towers, and each block clapped its painted face when it landed. Cupcake Robot winked its spun sprinkle eyes and marched with a bouncy hop. The room hummed with careful joy. Even the moon lamp smiled, casting a round golden puddle on the floor where the toys danced and spun. Halfway through their little show, a soft problem popped up. The rainbow kite toy, resting by the bedpost, had a bent stick and a droopy tail. "Oh dear," said Patch Cat Plush, tiptoeing over, "we cannot have a sad kite on stage." Teddy nodded and said, "We mend it together." Rocket Car offered a sticker for the tail, Wooden Train nudged a puzzle block to use as a splint, and Cupcake Robot whirred to fetch a tiny ribbon. They worked with slow, careful paws and patient clanks until the kite stood proud again. With the kite mended, the music grew. The music box played a soft tune that smelled like honey and warm mittens. The tune told a story of star puddles and friendly clouds. Teddy hummed a hum solo, Patch Cat Plush twirled, and Rocket Car gently pushed the kite into a pretend breeze. The wooden train kept time with a careful clack-clack beat. The toys listened to one another and learned little rhythms, like how to slow the parade so it would not wake Lila's slow, moon-breathing sleep. A small adventure followed outside the bed's edge. A shadowed carpet hill became a mountain to climb. Teddy led the way, using a patchwork blanket as a rope. Rocket Car rolled like a brave explorer, the wooden train chugged each step, and the puzzle blocks built tiny footholds. They sang soft songs about brave crumbs and kind clouds while their tiny feet and wheels carried them up. At the top, they found a secret. A shiny coin tucked under the rug's fringe, a tiny treasure left by a moonbeam long ago. The treasure coin made everyone giggle. Cupcake Robot did a tiny victory spin, scattering sugar sparkle noises. Teddy held the coin to the moon lamp light and it shimmered like a tiny sun. "It can be our star," whispered Patch Cat Plush, tucking it gently inside a block tower. They sang a whisper song and marched back down, careful not to wake sleeping toes. Their footsteps were small, but their hearts felt grand. The room held them like a secret friend, and everything felt soft and safe. Later, the toys decided to put on a tiny play. Puzzle blocks became trees, the music box grew a ribbon dress, and Teddy took the role of a gentle giant who could only speak in kind hugs. Rocket Car zipped lines like speedy wind, while Wooden Train puffed wise old choo-choos. Patch Cat Plush performed a silly tumble that made everyone clap. They practiced soft bows and polite whispers so their applause would be felt more than loudly heard. It was a show for moonbeams and for their favorite friend asleep in the bed. The tiny play was a gentle success. Toys bowed and the moon lamp blinked like a lantern clapping. Leela did not wake, but somewhere in her dreams she laughed softly and turned. The toys whispered that this was the most important applause because a smile in a dream is very real. They all agreed to tuck their props away. Rocket Car rolled the music box ribbon back. Puzzle blocks stacked into a neat tower, and Teddy wrapped the little coin in a soft blanket leaf, hiding it safely in the block tower treasure chest. Suddenly, from the hallway came a tiny sound like a sniffle. The toys froze. A lost sock monster, a rumpled stray sock, had wandered into the room and was shivering under the chair. "Oh," said Patch Cat Plush, padding over with soft feet. Teddy offered his own little scarf. A ribbon and Cupcake Robot hummed a warm tune. The sock monster sniffed, and when the music wrapped it like a blanket, it stopped worrying. The toys learned that kindness could mend more than broken kites. It could warm a tiny lost thing's heart, too. After they helped, the toys felt sleepy in a good way. The music box played the slowest song it had, like a lullaby made of feathers. One by one, Rocket Car parked itself in a cozy groove, Wooden Train backed into its usual spot, and Cupcake Robot wound down to a soft tick. Patch Cat Plush tucked into a block cave, and Teddy sat by Leela's pillow to keep watch. They whispered the secret rules of sleeping toys: be gentle, be quiet, and return every lost thing to a safer place. But before the final hush, Rocket Car made a tiny idea. "Let's leave Leela a morning surprise," he whispered. The toys all brightened, plotting something small and sweet. Puzzle blocks spelled the word smile, and the music box promised a soft twinkle when opened. They arranged the rainbow kite across the foot of the bed like a bright bookmark, and Teddy tucked the coin where Leela might find it in a careful, secret way. Working together felt like a warm puzzle that fit just right. The first hush of dawn crept in like a shy kitten. The toys hurried to finish. Rocket Car hurried a soft little scoot back on the shelf, Wooden Train clicked into its painted groove, and puzzle blocks shuffled into a neat stack that read "Smile" from the bed's cozy place. Music box wound the tiniest bit more so it would sing a very small hello when opened. Teddy gave a last tender pat on Leela's hair and whispered, "Sleep well, little dreamer. We'll be here." As morning yawned and light spilled across the room, the toys settled perfectly still. They became soft and still like waiting stones, button eyes gentle and faces calm. Leela stirred, rubbed her sleepy eyes, and blinked at the room. Her gaze landed on the puzzle blocks that whispered smile, and her mouth curved like a sunrise. She reached for Teddy and found, tucked inside the block tower, a tiny shiny coin that winked in the morning light. Leela gasped the smallest, happiest gasp. Leela laughed a bright little laugh and hugged Teddy close. She did not know how the coin got there, how the kite was mended, or why the music box sounded a softer tune, but she felt loved. She whispered a thank you to her toys and gave them the biggest sleepy squeeze. The toys, though still, felt the thank you like a tiny, warm drumbeat. They held it inside like a secret star, knowing they had shared magic and care, and that the room would be ready for another nighttime adventure. All day long, when the sun was bright and playtime noisy, the toys waited patiently for the sun to tuck itself away. They remembered their little night parade and the cozy rescue of the lost sock. When the house sang soft again and Leela's eyes began to droop, the toys looked at one another and winked a tiny wink of promise. Tonight, they thought, we will play gentler, love kinder, and dream even sweeter. For every child who sleeps, toys will keep a careful, starry watch. And so the room learned a secret. When a child loves a toy, that toy carries a little bravery, a little music, and a lot of care. The day the toys came alive was not one day only, but a promise tucked into ribbons and blocks. Each evening, they would wake, tiptoe, and keep the small, kind things that make a room gentle. And Leela, with a morning coin and a heart full of tiny wonder, always smiled a little wider the next day. The Mermaid under the Coral Reef. Beneath the wavy blue sea, under a curly coral roof, lived Myra the little mermaid. Her tail flashed coral pink when she twirled. She loved to hum soft songs and collect tiny sea treasures. Every morning, she greeted the reef like a friend. Fish peeked from bright coral windows. Seaweed waved hello like a green curtain. Myra pressed her palm to a tidy rock and smiled. Today the reef felt extra quiet. She wondered whether a new adventure was swimming nearby. Her hairband shell tapped twice, like a tiny asking knock. Myra set off, curious and careful. Nearby, Finn the striped fish bubbled excitedly. He loved to race Myra around coral towers and hide in tiny caves. Finn zipped through arches and puffed playful bubbles that tickled Myra's nose. They played peekaboo with anemone curtains and counted tiny shells on the sand. On a shelf of purple coral, something small winked like a new star. It was a pale shell with a soft golden heart. The glow shell hummed a tiny tune. Myra reached out gently. Finn circled in delight. The quiet reef felt like it had a secret to tell them both. When Myra lifted the little shell, the water filled with a warm, whispery sound. The glow shell glowed like a pocket of sunset. It whispered, not in words that stung, but in gentle sea songs. The reef needs a tiny helping hand. Myra's fingers tingled with a warm friend feeling. Finn bobbed and listened. The shell's light pointed like a finger toward a quiet lane between two coral towers. Myra could feel the reef breathing softly. Something small and sad was waiting. She knew the kind of help that made things shine again. A small, kind, brave try. Myra decided to follow the shell's light. She called to friends, Starry the sea star who hugs coral with steady arms, and Octo the octopus who paints tiny coral sprouts every morning. They gathered beneath a waving fern of seaweed. Starry clapped with 5 bright arms, and Octo waved a paintbrush arm happily. The reef felt like a neighborhood where everyone came out to help. They packed tiny tools, a ribbon, some kelp ties, and a brave song. Finn led with bubbly wiggles. The glow shell glowed brighter, like a little lamp through the reef's leafy streets. The road under the reef wiggled like a friendly maze. Seaweed tickled their fins and made them giggle. Bright fish peeked from holes and offered directions with flutters. They followed tiny footprints of sand and shells that glowed faintly where the glow shell shone. Along the path, they met a shy seahorse who had lost his song. He breathed quiet and tiny. Myra leaned close and hummed a lullaby. Starry held his tail steady. The seahorse blinked, and for a second, he remembered a bright tune about coral birthdays. He brightened and decided to come along. They came to a shadowed nook where colors felt quieter. The glow shell made a soft path of light on the sand. Octo reached out with many arms to help part a curtain of soft feather coral. Tiny shy fish huddled inside, and Myra sang a soft tune. The tunnel smelled like rain after a very small wave. Somewhere deeper, there was a hush, like someone holding their breath. The friends held hands, fins, and arms linked, and moved slowly so the reef would not fright. Together, they were brave in the kindest ways. At the heart of the quiet, they found a tiny coral sprout wrapped in a gray net. The net was small, but it hugged the sprout and made its colors sleep. The reef's breath slowed. Myra's heart fluttered. This felt like the reason the glow shell had shone. Finn zipped around, trying to find an edge. Octo used a clever arm to hold a ribbon while Starry steadied the sprout. Together, they worked slowly and gently. The net did not want to be mean. It was old and tired. With careful tugs and kind words, they loosened a loop. Then, with a soft, joyful pull and a tiny cheer, the net slipped free. The coral sprout stretched like it woke from a long nap. Colors poured back, pink, gold, and tender green, like paint spilled in the nicest way. The reef breathed deep and sang tiny sparkles of sound. The seahorse sang a bright note that rolled like a pearl. Myra clapped with her hand and tail. Finn made a bubble crown. Octo painted a stripe of bright blue on a shell. Starry gave the sprout a 5-arm hug. The water felt full of thank you lights. The glow shell hummed a happy song and floated back to its small bed in a purple coral nook. Myra thought it wanted to rest where it would be safe and warm. They tucked it in gently, and the little shell gave a last golden wink. The reef glowed like a patchwork blanket. Old fish came out and told small thank you stories. Even the seaweed waved slower now, as if yawning. Myra learned that tiny hands and brave little friends could fix big-sounding problems. Finn bumped her tail in a silly hug. The reef felt like a house everyone loved. That night, the waves hummed a soft bedtime song. Stars above the sea peeked through the water like shy silver buttons. Myra curled on a sleepy sandbank with Finn curled near her fin. Octo painted a sleepy picture for the reef, and Starry rested on a warm coral branch. The reef told quiet jokes in bubble whispers and promised to keep each other safe. The glow shell glowed faintly, like a night lamp. Myra closed her eyes and thought of how small kindnesses glow for a long time. She dreamed of tomorrow's little adventures and the friends she would meet again. The Garden Gnome's Secret Mission. When the last child yawns and the garden lights blink sleepy goodnights, the little garden gnome wakes. He stretches one stubby arm and rubs his round nose. His red hat bobbles. He tiptoes from beneath a mushroom roof, holding a tiny brass lantern and a folded map. Tonight is special. He whispers, SHH, secret mission. The moon listens, and soft shadows hop as he steps onto the cool stone path. The garden smells like damp earth and mint, all ready for a midnight adventure. His first helper is a robin who loves shiny things. The robin hops down, curious about the map. Where are we going? It chirps. The gnome points to a drawing of tiny smiles and open flowers. To gather sleepy giggles and moonlight for morning, so the flowers will wake bright for the picnic, he explains. The robin fluffs up, delighted to work. Together, they tuck the map under the lantern's glow and plan their path, past the puddle, under the ivy arch, and by the old watering can. By the puddle lives a sleepy cat who loves moon puddles nearly as much as naps. The gnome tiptoes and whispers, "We need your slow, soft purrs to tuck the garden awake." The cat opens one golden eye and yawns a big, soft yawn. "I can purr like a warm blanket," it says in a tiny rumble. The gnome and robin listen. The cat curls its tail and hums, sending sleepy, cozy purrs across the pond. Little ripples carry purr music to lily pads and tadpoles. A shy snail slides from a cool leaf, leaving a glittering trail. "I am slow, but I have shimmery tracks that tickle toes awake," it says, whispering. The gnome smiles and ties a tiny ribbon to his pocket pebble whistle for a soft jingle. The snail wraps its shell with a tiny leaf scarf for the mission. Together, they make a quiet parade, snail gliding, gnome stepping, robin tip-tapping. The garden listens, mosses uncurl, and a tiny mushroom gives a polite nod. Fireflies wink on like tiny evening candles, ready to dance. The gnome holds out his lantern and the fireflies swirl into it for a moment, making the light sing. "We will sprinkle moon sparkle across the path," they promise with tiny twinkly voices. The path becomes a ribbon of glowy dots leading under an ivy arch. The gnome hums a little tune, and the robin practices chirpy cheers. The whole garden feels like a sleeping parade of twinkles and soft sounds. They meet a brave little ladybug polishing her spots on a dandelion. "I can carry brave wishes," she says, puffing tiny bug chest out. "I'll fly to the highest bloom and whisper, 'Wake up, it's time to smile.'" The gnome claps his mittened hands. He gives the ladybug a soft petal flag to wave. Together, they practice their wake-up whisper, a gentle, bouncing rhyme that sounds like honey and sunlight. Each friend learns the rhyme so every voice will be ready. The little seedling peeks from the soil, worried and very small. "I want to find the perfect spot to grow up big and tall," it whispers. The gnome kneels gently and says, "We'll help you find sunlight and hugs from friendly roots." The robin points with its beak, the snail makes a sparkly trail, the ladybug scouts high, and the fireflies make a soft glow tunnel. The seedling wiggles happily as they make a cozy bed of leaves and soft soil for a morning stretch. A little storm wind comes by, curious and playful. It wants to race the leaves and knock hats askew. The gnome holds his lantern close while the fireflies swirl faster. "We must be gentle but brave," says the robin. The sleepy cat stretches and steadies a stone to block the gust. The ladybug holds the seedling's leaf like an umbrella. Everyone works in tiny ways until the wind blusters onward, chuckling, satisfied it played politely with friends. The gnome checks the tiny map again. The last step is a hush and a song. They gather in a circle. Gnome lantern, robin chest, cat paws, snail shell, ladybug wings, and fireflies like stars above. Each friend hums their gift, purrs, chirps, jingles, and soft wing trumps. The gnome holds the pebble whistle and taps it so the sound is a gentle bell. Together, they sing the Bounce of Sun rhyme, a soft tune that smells like toast and morning dew. As they sing, little petals begin to wiggle from their sleep. One by one, sleepy blossoms stretch long stems and blink open eyes of petals. The moon claps with its silver hands. The seedling gives a tiny sneeze of sunlight, and the lawn seems to giggle. The gnome and friends tiptoe back so not to scare the blooms, watching in whisper silence as the garden wakes like a big cozy book opening to the sky. When the first hint of morning pink tickles the clouds, the gnome smiles a secret smile. The garden looks ready for the picnic, bright flowers, a neat little spot for a blanket, and a soft wind carrying fresh bread smells from far away. The robin flutters up and sings a tiny sunrise tune. The sleepy cat yawns its biggest yawn and curls again with a contented purr. All the friends feel proud that the garden will wake with giggles and happy faces. The gnome tidies his map, blows a little kiss to the moon, and gathers his lantern. He thanks each friend with a soft touch, a rub on the robin's chest, a pat for the cat, a leaf bow to the snail, a wink to the ladybug, and a thankful clap for the fireflies. "You helped me on my secret mission," he says quietly. The friends giggle in their garden voices and promise to help whenever the garden needs a nap waker or a smile bringer again. As the sun lifts higher, two small children wander down the garden path, rubbing sleepy eyes and humming. They stop short. The garden greets them with open-faced sunflowers and a sprinkle of morning giggles. The children laugh and say, "Who woke everything up?" They find a tiny pebble whistle, a ribbon, and a tiny folded map near a mushroom door. Their eyes sparkle with wonder. They do not know the gnome's secret, but their smiles make the gnome's day glow brighter. Back under his mushroom roof, the gnome places his lantern by a tiny window and tucks the map into a snug drawer. He pats his hat, and the pebble whistle hangs on a little nail to jingle in future adventures. He hums the same Bounce of Sun rhyme, now quieter because it is almost nap time for him. Outside, the garden buzzes softly with colors and friendly chatter from bees and butterflies starting their day. Just before the gnome closes his eyes, he writes one line on his map in tiny dotted letters. "Mission, make smiles." He draws a small heart beside it and tucks the map under his pillow. The moon peeks through a slit in the curtains and nods goodnight. The gnome dreams of tomorrow's quiet missions. Maybe a lost caterpillar to help, perhaps a shy bud to sing to. He snores a small, happy snore, and the garden keeps its secret safe. In the morning, the children cuddle up beneath a sun hat and spread the blanket where the garden looks happiest. They giggle, they taste jammy berries, and they listen close to hear if the flowers will tell them the secret. The gnome watches from a far corner, his cheeks dimpling with joy. He does not need to be known. His reward is the chorus of laughter that fills the garden air. This is the sweetest part of his secret mission. And so, whenever the sky grows soft and sleepy again, the little garden gnome remembers his map and his list of tiny friends. He knows a secret mission is always waiting. A whisper to a bud, a song for a snail, and a brave little ladybug to carry wishes. He hops into his shoes, straightens his hat, and tiptoes out with lantern and laugh, ready to make more smiles, because gardens and giggles belong to everyone, seen and unseen. The forest full of singing birds. Leela loved listening. Every morning she pressed her ear to the window to hear the world waking up. A kettle that hummed, a cat that mewed, a far-off bell that rang. One afternoon she heard something new, a soft, looping tune drifting from the trees near her house. It sounded like someone humming and smiling all at once. Curious, she slipped on her little shoes, tucked a pebble and a ribbon into her pocket, and tiptoed toward the green whisper of the forest. The path smelled of moss and warm earth. She felt all kinds of curious in her belly. As Leela walked between tall trunks, the tune grew clearer. Peeps and trills like tiny bells, swoops of melody like ribbon in the breeze. Sunlight threaded through the leaves and dust motes danced like tiny singers. The first bird was a robin with a red chest who hopped down to greet her. He chirped a bright hello that sounded like two quick notes and a giggle. Leela smiled and answered with a soft hum. The robin bobbed and bobbed, pleased to hear her hum back. Around them, other birds rustled nearby, curious too. Deeper in, a bluebird with feathers like the sky opened her voice and poured a long, clear note that shivered like a bell. Leela thought it sounded like someone saying hello in a slow, lovely way. A yellow canary bounced in the branches and sent out quick, twinkling notes that felt like sunshine laughing. The forest seemed to arrange the music like a story. Peeps, then bells, then bright little sparks. A soft rustle revealed a friendly fox tail behind a fern. He peered out with gentle eyes and a small, swaying smile, as if the music made him want to tap a paw. At the heart of the trees stood the old oak, wider than a house and wrapped with little green vines. Its branches spread like a blanket and leaves whispered like old friends. Tucked into a low crook was a tiny golden whistle, tied with a faded ribbon that had once been bright. The robin hopped to the oak and tapped the whistle with his beak. Sometimes, the bird said, the whistle kept a whisper of every song the forest had ever sung. Leela peered and wondered, could a small whistle hold so much music? The birds spoke in trills and peeps about a hush that sometimes visited their wings. Some mornings our songs feel sleepy, Bluebell said, and Sunny chirped that her bright notes would wobble and fall. Leela's brow furrowed. She wanted to help. The robin hopped onto Leela's shoulder as if to say, we try to remember, but some notes hide. Mr. Fox sat nearer, ears twitching to listen. The old oak rumbled softly, telling Leela that music loved company and sometimes needed a new friend to wake it up. Leela reached out and touched the little golden whistle. It was warm from the day's sun and it tinkled with a tiny note when she moved it. Try it, the robin encouraged. Leela lifted the whistle and blew softly. A thin silver sound slipped out and dangled in the air like a string of tiny bells. The birds circled, eyes wide like cups drinking the sound. The forest leaned in. The whistle's note was small, but it was the start of something. Leela felt a tiny flutter of bravery. She had made one bright sound. Leela tried another note, and the whistle answered with a kind echo. But as she blew more loudly to help the birds remember, the sounds tangled together. Bell with chirp, bright twinkle with deep hum, and for a moment the forest grew puzzled. A breeze picked up and leaves shivered. A tiny hush slipped between the trees. The birds halted mid-song and looked uncertain. Leela's cheeks grew warm. She hadn't meant to tangle the tunes. She put the whistle down and listened very carefully, wanting to hear how to make the music happy again. Just then, a soft cloud rolled over the sun and the forest held its breath. The robin hopped forward and peeped a tiny, steady note. Bluebell followed with a long bell-like sound, pure and wide. Sunny sprinkled little high notes like pebbles. Leela remembered how each had sounded when she first came in, the robin's quick giggle, Bluebell's slow bell, Sunny's bright twinkles. Her face lit up. "We must help each other sing our own notes," she said. Her voice was small but sure, and it sounded like a lantern turning on. This is the story's bright, joyful moment. Leela led the birds in a little game. She tapped the robin gently and copied his quick two-note chirp. Then she nodded to Bluebell and breathed a slow, bell-like note back. Sunny fluttered, and Leela tried the tiny sparkling sounds. The forest answered back, echoes weaving like ribbons. Mr. Fox pawed a tiny beat on the ground and leaves danced. Each bird remembered its own song, and when they sang together, their voices braided into something new and glittering. Leela clapped with a laugh. As the music grew, the old oak seemed to hum along. Even the hollow creaked a happy squeak. Birds flew in small loops, and the sound traveled like a ribbon across the treetops. The moonlight pond in the distance flashed little silver ripples as if clapping with water. Leela felt the melody hop into her bones and skip out through her fingertips. She danced a tiny circle, and Mr. Fox joined with a gentle twirl. The whistle, left on its ribbon, chimed every time a bird passed, adding a tiny bell to the harmony. When the sun began to lower, the birds gathered on the old oak's branches like little bright notes pinned against the sky. They thanked Leela in chirps and trills, and the robin hopped onto her little shoulder in thanks. "Come again," Bluebell sang like a promise. Leela tied a tiny ribbon of her own to the whistle's string so it would remember her touch. Mr. Fox kissed her knobby knee with a soft nuzzle. Leela felt sleepy and proud at once. She had helped the forest remember how to sing. On the path home, the trees hummed behind her with new stories tucked in their leaves. Leela hummed back each tune she remembered, and for a while her melody mixed with the far-off last notes of the birds. The pebble in her pocket felt like a tiny drum. She promised to visit again and to bring new songs she found in puddles and on the playground. That night, at her window, the forest's music lulled her. In her dreams, the birds gave her a crown woven of leaves and song, and she wore it while the whole sky sang softly. The next morning, the sun painted her room gold, and a small bright chirp drifted to her window. Leela smiled in her sleep and stretched like a happy cat. Outside, the forest had kept its songs safe. Now they were threads between trees and people who paused to listen. Leela tucked her ribbon into a little book of sounds she kept under her pillow. When she grew up, she would remember how a small child with a pebble and a ribbon helped a whole forest sing again. For now, she dreamed of tunes, and the woods hummed a sleepy, gentle lullaby. The Secret of the Old Mill. At the edge of the little village stood the old mill. It leaned a tiny bit to the left and hummed with the wind. Children liked to run past it and clap their hands when the wheel turned slow. Myra loved the mill best. She wore a bright blue scarf and tiny freckles on her nose. Each evening, she would sit on the low stone and listen for whispers from inside the round window. The whispers sounded like the end of a song and the start of a new one. Pip the squirrel and Benny the mill mouse were Myra's friends. Pip chased sunbeams and loved shiny little things. Benny was small and careful and always carried a tiny crumb for later. The three of them pretended the mill was a castle, a rocket, and a cave that kept secrets. One morning, when the dew still made the grass sparkle, Pip spotted something glinting in the moss. It was tiny and bright. He called, "Myra, Benny, look." Myra reached into the cool moss and found a tiny golden key. It fit in her palm like a little sun. The key had a leaf-shaped bow and a gentle sparkle that made Pip chatter excitedly. Where did it come from? Myra wondered. Benny sniffed it with tiny whiskers and squeaked once. The key hummed softly and felt warm. It looked as if it wanted to find a special lock, so Myra held it up to the mill, and the round window seemed to blink as if listening. They walked all around the old mill to find a lock the key might open. The wooden wheel creaked, and the air smelled of warm bread and wet leaves. There was a tiny door near the back, just above the roots of an old willow. It was round and small, with a little keyhole tucked beneath a patch of moss. Their hearts tapped like little drums. Myra knelt down and held the key to the keyhole. Pip and Benny watched in a hush so quiet butterflies would have been surprised to move. Myra slid the tiny golden key into the keyhole and turned it with a hopeful wiggle. The key clicked like a tiny bell, and a soft chime rolled through the mill like a sleepy laugh. The round door opened just a crack, and a warm, gentle light spilled out, smelling faintly of cinnamon and rain. A narrow, curved stairway curled down like the inside of a shell. Pip squeaked with delight, and Benny tucked his crumb higher in his fur to be ready for anything. They tiptoed down the curving stair. The room at the bottom smelled of old paper and wildflowers. Shelves hugged the round walls, and jars with buttons, ribbons, and tiny bells lined them up like smiley rows. A little wooden shelf held a tiny music box carved to look like a mill. When Myra brushed away a leaf, she saw that the music box had a winding keyhole and a painted wheel, and it trembled like it wanted to wake up. Pip's whiskers twitched. Benny held his breath. Myra gently wound the music box. It began to play a tune so soft it felt like a hug. The mill's little window upstairs hummed back, and lanterns flickered on within the tiny room. The tune smelled like rain on summer stones and tasted like fresh bread crumbs in Benny's memory. As the song spun, the paint on the music box glowed, and tiny silver notes drifted up like dandelion fluff. Those notes tucked themselves into jars and corners, making the whole room breathe in song. Then, from the curl of a millstone, a breeze unfolded into shape and winked at them. It was Windle, a tiny breeze spirit, all ribbons, leaves, and gentle light. Windle laughed in little gusts and danced around Pip's tail. "Hello," Windle whispered, its voice like a bell in a shell. "You found my music." Myra felt a flutter of happiness. Windle's ribbons smelled like first leaves and made tiny sparkles on the floor. Benny's tiny paws tapped to the tune. Windle twirled and told them the mill's secret. "I collect songs," it said, "and stories and little sleepy sighs. I fold them into jars and tuck them under stones. I keep giggles safe so they can be used again." Myra listened with wide eyes. Pip hopped in a circle like a spring. Benny snuggled closer and felt proud that he had kept crumbs for so long. The old mill was not just a building. It was a treasure box of tiny sounds that made the village glad. Wendell showed them jars labeled with tiny words. First laughs, raindrop rhythm, lullaby, and moonshine hum. When it popped a jar open, a soft sound puffed out and painted tiny rainbows in the air. The mill had collected the village's happiest little noises for years. Myra and her friends felt like keepers of something kind and important. "Can we help?" Myra asked. Wendell swirled happily. "Yes, we can mend a torn tune and stitch a missing rhyme together." They made a plan. Myra would hum a tune, Pip would chase the scattering notes, and Benny would tuck the smallest whispers into a safe jar. For a while, everything hummed like a happy kitchen. They mended a torn lullaby that had lost a line, and they stitched a lost rhyme back to its song. Wendell taught them how to fold sound gently and place it on a shelf where it would not get lonely. The mill hummed along, pleased as a cat in sunshine. Suddenly, the sky angrily rolled a thundercloud and rain started to drum on the mill roof. A big gust rattled the window and made the lanterns sway. Some loose musical notes slipped free and tumbled out the little door. Wendell tried to hold them, but it began to thin like mist. "Oh no," Pip shouted as the storm pulled at the songs. The wheel groaned and the jars rattled. The mill sounded worried, and Myra's heart knocked very fast. This was the moment they needed to be brave. Myra took a deep breath and began to sing the tune they had mended. Her voice was steady and warm like bread fresh from the oven. Pip leapt into a gust and caught 2 fluttering notes with a brave little cheer. Benny scampered along the edge and pushed a bell to ring a steady beat. Wendell gathered itself with a small swirl, warmed by their voices, and puffed up stronger. Together, they sang louder and softer, louder again, until the notes remembered where they belonged. The storm grumbled away, leaving shiny puddles and a sky brushed with pink. The old mill sighed a happy, creaky sigh. Wendell danced and glittered, fuller and brighter than before. The jars were whole, and the music box sang a little skitter of a tune to say thank you. Wendell tied a tiny ribbon around Myra's scarf and gave Pip a small leaf to keep, and Benny a crumb that tasted like honey and sunshine. They all felt the gentle hush of a day saved by friends. From that day on, the mill kept its secret happily, but it also opened once in a while for quiet visitors. Myra, Pip, and Benny would come to listen and to help Wendell gather new sounds. The clink of spoons, a baby's first giggle, the soft squeak of a sleepy owl. The village never knew the exact way their little noises were kept safe, but they liked to see the mill glow at night. Myra would smile and tuck her hand into her scarf where the tiny key sometimes hummed. When bedtime came, Myra would say goodnight to the old mill and to Wendell. "Keep our songs safe," she would whisper, and Wendell would swirl like a sleepy ribbon and promise to do so. The music box sat on its shelf and hummed a little lullaby that smelled of moonlight. Pip curled around a tiny acorn, and Benny tucked his crumb under a leaf. The mill hummed softly in the dark. The secret was not a secret meant to hide, but a gentle promise to guard the small, bright things that make life kind. And sometimes, on wind breath nights, the village kids would hear a whisper of a tune and hum along without knowing why their toes wanted to tap. That was the old mill sharing a sprig of its secret with everyone. Myra would look up at the mill and smile, knowing that some treasures are kept for sharing. The mill would wink its round window, and the sparkling stream would add a little sparkle to the song. The secret stayed secret enough to be special, but bright enough to make nights sweet. Penny and the Pirate Parrot. Penny liked the wind on the beach. She liked the sand between her toes and the little wooden boat she carried each day. Today the sky was high and a giggle came from the driftwood sign. Sitting on the sign was a bright parrot with a tiny red bandana and one missing golden feather. He bobbed and clicked his beak. "Ahoy!" he squawked in a sing-song voice. Penny blinked, smiled, and tipped her toy boat toward him. The parrot fluffed his feathers and said, "Pip, pip, treasure." Penny laughed and sat down in the sand to listen. Pip the pirate parrot hopped down with a soft cluck. He picked up a tiny, crinkled paper with his beak and nudged it toward Penny. The paper rolled open and showed a little map with a red X, wavy blue lines, and a picture of a smiling shell. "Follow the giggle, follow the sand," Pip chirped, tapping the map with his wing. Penny's eyes grew wide. She loved maps. She loved giggles. She folded the map into her pocket, took her boat, and whispered, "Shall we Pip?" Pip replied with a happy squawk, and they began to walk, tiny footprints in the warm sand. They walked past a puddle that shone like a little mirror. Penny set her toy boat in the water and Pip tapped the tiny sail, making it sing. A shell on the shore opened just a bit and hummed a soft tune. "Hello," the shell whispered. It liked songs, it liked friends, and it gave them a clue. "Follow the laughing gull to the sleepy cave." Off they went, Penny carrying the boat and Pip flapping with excitement. The gull above giggled and danced in the breeze. The beach felt as if it were clapping along with them. The laughing gull led them along a path of smooth stones. Each stone had a tiny sparkle, like a star caught on the shore. A friendly orange starfish waved a little arm and pointed down a narrow way between two dunes. This way," it hummed in a tiny voice. Penny thanked the starfish and tucked the map back into her pocket. They passed seaweed curtains that brushed their knees and a small rock pool where silver fish peeked up to say hello. Pip preened and repeated the fish's bubbly whispers, and Penny grinned at the busy sea friends. When they reached the sleepy cave, the entrance yawned like a big mouth made of shells. The cave smelled of salt and warm sand. Inside, the light was dappled and warm, and little glowing pebbles lined the path. A tiny fiddling crab sat on a rock, stroking a small violin and humming a slow tune. He stopped and winked at them. "Ah, visitors," he clacked, playing a few cheerful notes. "If you need music to find your way, just listen to the tune and step when it sways." Penny tapped her foot and followed the melody, fingers holding Pip's soft wing. Deeper in the cave, a gentle breeze whooshed past and made a little bell of shells chime. The map in Penny's pocket felt warm, and when she opened it, a new drawing appeared, a tiny hill with a single tall dune and a golden shimmer on top. "The golden feather," Pip croaked. He puffed up, almost glowing with hopeful excitement. Penny clutched the map and hopped across stepping stones of sand. They climbed the short sand hill together, laughing as the wind ruffled Penny's hair and tickled Pip's feathers, until both of them couldn't stop giggling. At the very top of the dune, a tiny bird's nest sat tucked into the sand like a secret. There, half buried in soft shells, was a single golden feather that shimmered like a small sun. Pip's eyes widened until they glowed like two tiny lanterns. He hopped up, and gently picked the feather. It felt warm and made a whispering sound, like a lullaby from the sea. Pip pressed the feather to his chest and remembered a cozy island where he once learned to sing. Penny clapped softly. The feather was more than pretty. It felt like home. Suddenly, the sand nearby shifted and a small cloud of giggles floated up. A tiny pirate, gentle as a whisper, peeked from behind a rock. He wore a floppy hat and a smile, and his eyes searched the sky. He looked a bit lost. "Oh, my hat," he sighed. Penny noticed it was a very familiar hat, woven with tiny shells and a faded ribbon. The gentle pirate's voice was soft and a little shaky. Pip flew over and offered the golden feather. The pirate's eyes lit up. "My hat, my song." He sang, thanking them with a grateful little bow. The pirate sat and told a quiet story of long ago when he learned to whistle with the waves. He had been looking for his lost hat and a song to remember. Pip listened, feather tucked close, and Penny listened with both hands cupped to her ears as if catching notes. The pirate hummed a little tune, the fiddling crab added a soft violin, and the shell chimes answered. Together, they made a gentle song that sounded like sea wind and bedtime. The cave smiled, the pebbles glowed, and everyone felt snug and brave all at once. When the song finished, the pirate tapped his hat and found a tiny drawing sewn into its ribbon, a little chest with a heart. "Maybe the real treasure is what we make together," he smiled. Penny thought of all the laughs, the music, and Pip's remembered island. Pip tucked the golden feather behind his wing and gave a proud parrot strut. The pirate led them to a small patch of sand where a tiny sparkling chest sat half-hidden beneath a pile of shells. It chimed gently as if it already held a few songs inside. Penny opened the chest with careful, excited hands. Inside were shiny shells that sang when touched, a small mirror that made everyone smile, soft ribbons, and a handful of bright marbles that rolled like tiny planets. Each shell sang a tiny note, and together they made a happy, tinkling song. Pip found a tiny patch that fit the golden feather perfectly and sewed it in with a bit of salty thread. The pirate placed his hat on the chest and tapped it like a drum. "Treasure." They all cheered in a gentle, giggly way. They decided the treasure was for sharing. Penny took a marbled bead and gave it to the fiddling crab. The crab danced and played a sprightlier tune that made the pebbles sparkle. The starfish received a shiny shell and made it glow brighter on her rock. Pip tucked the golden feather into his wing where it would be safe and warm. The pirate tied a ribbon around his hat and declared the beach the Friends' Cove, a place for songs and kind things. Penny felt her heart tingle like the tiny bells in the cave. The sun began to bend toward the ocean like a sleepy orange ball. Shadows grew long, and the sea turned a soft, sleepy blue. Penny gathered her toy boat and tucked the map gently into her pocket. Pip hopped on her shoulder, feather catching the last golden light. The pirate waved his hand and promised to listen for their songs whenever the wind came singing. The fiddling crab played a slow, happy tune that sounded like a bedtime story. Penny yawned a little, feeling sleepy and very full of adventure and friends. On the walk back, Penny and Pip stopped to help a tiny lost fish find a deep puddle. They hummed a little tune and the fish flicked its tail in thanks. The gull above did a slow, lazy circle and the starfish waved goodnight. Pip told silly pirate jokes that made Penny giggle until she hiccuped. Each hiccup sounded like a tiny drum beat. The beach had become full of quiet music, like a soft blanket. Penny felt brave with sand on her knees and the gentle parrot at her side. When they reached Penny's little cottage at the edge of the beach, Mum was waiting with a warm towel and 2 mugs of warm milk, one for Penny and a tiny dish of seed and crumbs for Pip. Penny showed Mum the map and the golden feather and told the story with big hand gestures and small, happy squeaks from Pip. Mum laughed and tucked a blanket under Penny's chin. Pip curled his head under his wing on Penny's shoulder, feather safe and warm. The house smelled of baking, and the day felt like a ribbon tied around their shoulders. As night came, Penny's bedroom glowed with a small lamp and the whisper of the sea. Pip told one last parrot tale, a tiny story about an island that hummed lullabies. Penny listened with eyes half closed and held the little mirror that had made everyone smile. She whispered thank you to Pip and the pirate in the cave and to the fiddling crab who played that gentle tune. Pip clicked his beak softly and settled down. Outside, the moon climbed on its ladder of stars and the beach hummed a soft, sleepy song. Before Penny drifted fully to sleep, she dreamed of new maps and small, laughing gulls. In her dream, Pip led a parade of sea friends along the shore, each carrying a tiny treasure to share. The pirate clapped his hands and the fiddling crab played faster, but gentle, songs. The golden feather shone like a little moon on Pip's wing. Penny smiled in her sleep and hugged her toy boat like a friend. The dream promised more gentle adventures tomorrow, with new laughs, new songs, and more friends waiting on the sand. When morning came, Penny woke with sand still in her hair from the day before, though she had been snug in bed all night. Pip stretched and gave a cheerful squawk, as if to say, "Are you ready?" Penny kissed Pip on his head and looked out the window. The sea sparkled like tiny coins. She knew the map would always be there, and the chest of songs could be opened again and shared with anyone who needed a smile. Penny and Pip promised to visit the Friends' Cove whenever the sun was playful and the wind wanted to sing. So Penny and the pirate parrot set off again, sometimes for a puddle, sometimes for a song, and sometimes just to find a new, tiny treasure to share. The beach remembered their footsteps and the gulls remembered their tunes. The golden feather glowed when Pip laughed, and Penny's little wooden boat had many voyages, even on puddles at home. Every day brought a small, shiny moment of friendship, a new note to hum, and the warm feeling of knowing that treasure can be as simple as a song shared between 2 friends. Sammy's Spectacular Circus Surprise. Sammy lived in a cozy oak tree at the edge of a small green yard. One sunny afternoon, while collecting shiny pebbles, Sammy spotted something different, glitter twinkling under a pile of autumn leaves. He brushed the leaves aside and found a tiny golden ticket with a little moon on it. The ticket smelled faintly of sugar and whispered of surprises. Sammy's nose wiggled with excitement. His little heart buzzed like a jar of busy bees. He tucked the ticket behind his ear and hurried to tell someone, imagining bright colors and music. Sammy scampered to his friend Millie's tiny doorway. Millie, the mouse, loved surprises and shiny things. When Sammy showed the ticket, Millie clapped her paws and blew a cheerful whistle that sounded like a bright bell. Together, they read the tiny letters, "Backyard Circus tonight. Bring friends," Millie's sparkly hat tipped jauntily as she imagined costumes and tiny drums. They hopped, twirled, and decided to invite everyone. They scribbled little notes and left them on the oak and the garden fence, their giggles echoing like tiny bells. Benny the bear cub found his invitation tucked under a pile of soft leaves. Benny loved balancing and big hugs, so he practiced wobbling on a log right away. Tilly, the stripy kitten, pounced into the garden chasing a bouncing balloon and squealed when she saw the paper. Ellie, the baby elephant, who lived near the pond, trumpeted softly and put on a flower garland. Professor Popcorn, the clever raccoon, polished his popcorn cart and tied a bow. Everyone buzzed with plans and promises, juggling, hoops, music, and a very special surprise. They worked all afternoon under a blue sky. Millie taught everyone how to bow like a tiny ringmaster, and Sammy helped hammer little wooden signs that read Sammy's Spectacular Circus. Benny practiced balancing cups and a tiny barrel, wobbling and tumbling into giggles. Tilly learned to jump through a bright ribbon hoop while batting a little drum. Ellie practiced a gentle trumpet that made butterflies flutter, and Professor Popcorn tested the popcorn maker, Pop. Pop, so sweet kernels danced in the air. They taped up ribbons and hung lanterns, tails and whiskers twitching with joy. As the sun lowered and painted the sky in pinks and purples, they set up a small red and yellow big top tent. It wasn't tall like circus tents in storybooks, but it shimmered with lanterns and made a cozy round stage. Balloons bobbed and a tiny drum sat by the entrance. Sammy tied the shiny ticket to a string and hung it above the door like a golden bell. Friends and neighbors, small hedgehogs, friendly robins, and curious frogs gathered on blankets. The yard hummed like a hive of happy sound and tiny applause. Rehearsal had hiccups. Benny tried to balance 3 juggling balls but sneezed. Balls flew like tiny planets. Tilly's hoop tangled in streamers, and Millie tripped on a ribbon while pretending to be very stately. Ellie sneezed confetti, which made everyone cough and then laugh until they cried little happy tears. Professor Popcorn saved the moment by tossing popcorn into the air like confetti, too. Sammy felt a tiny wobble of worry in his tummy. What if their show was too silly? What if no one clapped? Millie tapped her whistle and squeaked something encouraging. "Silly can be splendid," she said. The friends huddled and decided to make the silliness the show's secret sparkle. Sammy found his courage by imagining everyone giggling together. He drew a bright program with doodled stars and placed it by the entrance. They practiced again, slowly, with giggles between steps. Benny made a gentle wobble into a funny bow. Tilly's leaps turned into twirling dances. Slowly, the yard felt ready, like a big warm hug waiting under the tent. Night arrived, and the stars peeked out like tiny glitter stuck to the sky. Lanterns in the tent twinkled, and the little audience hushed with excitement. Sammy's paws trembled as he opened the show with a tiny tap-tap on the drum. Millie announced the acts in a squeaky, proud voice. Benny balanced and bowed, making everyone clap at his brave smile. Tilly leaped through bright hoops while confetti floated like sleepy snow. Ellie trumpeted softly, so the sound felt like a lullaby. Professor Popcorn sold handfuls of warm popcorn to squeals of delight. Then came the surprise, Sammy's favorite part. He had saved the shiny ticket for a special trick. "Close your eyes," he whispered to his friends. Everyone did. Sammy climbed a tiny ladder, tied the ticket to a string, and let it soar up into the tent roof. As the ticket fluttered, the lanterns blinked just so, and a soft moonbeam, like a silver ribbon, slipped through a gap in the tent, turning the ticket into a little shining star. The whole yard gasped and then shouted with glee. The moon itself seemed to clap its hands in twinkling applause. The giggles became a fine music of happy sounds. Sammy felt his tummy buzz into a warm, brave feeling. He led a tiny parade around the tent, Millie perched on a mini drum, Benny wobbling proudly, Tilly prancing, Ellie spraying a gentle confetti shower, and Professor Popcorn tossing popcorn like tiny stars. Neighbors cheered, frogs croaked funny rhythms, and the robins chimed in. The show didn't need perfect tricks, just bright hearts and friendly faces. Sammy's smile stretched wide as the moon shone, full and round, right over the tent. When the final bow came, everyone clapped and stamped little feet. Sammy took a tiny bow and felt proud like a balloon ready to float. Millie handed him back the golden ticket, and he kept it close to his heart. "Best surprise ever," Benny mumbled through a yawn. Tilly curled into a purring nap on a soft blanket. Ellie sighed a happy trumpet, petals from her garland drifting down. Professor Popcorn counted leftover kernels and winked. The lights dimmed slowly. The tent hummed like a happy bee nest, full of warm memories. After the circus, the friends snuggled under the stars on soft blankets. Sammy tucked the ticket in a tiny wooden box and put it on a shelf inside his oak tree. The box would be a memory keeper, a place for dreams and future surprises. Millie hummed a lullaby, Benny mumbled a gentle story about balancing on clouds, Tilly's whiskers twitched in sleep, and Ellie drifted into quiet trumpet snores. Professor Popcorn packed up his cart with a sleepy smile. The yard settled, full of friendly hush and the promise of tomorrow's play. In the morning, the yard smelled like warm popcorn and fresh day. Sammy peeked out and smiled at the wooden box. He knew the circus had been small but spectacular because everyone shared their best, sillies and all. He scampered to Millie to plan a new, tiny adventure, maybe a lemonade stand or a moonbeam picnic. The golden ticket rested safely, a twinkly promise that surprises were always just around the corner when friends worked together. Sammy skipped away, tail high, ready for the next sparkling idea. Little Bear's Big Winter Adventure. Little Bear woke to a hush. The world outside his window was white and quiet, as if someone had painted the ground with milk. He pressed his nose to the glass and watched tiny snowflakes tumble from the sky, each one winking in the morning light. His heart did a happy hop. Today would be a big winter day, he decided. He could feel adventure rustling like the scarf his mother kept near the door. Little Bear put on his boots and padded outside, where every twig and rock wore a glittering hat of snow. He wrapped the red scarf snug around his neck, its bright color like a little flag against the white. Little Bear took 3 big breaths of cold, sweet air and imagined the wishes he would make on each snowflake. He thought of crunchy footprints, sliding down gentle hills, and building a new friend from snow. The trees were tall and hushed. Each evergreen wore its best snowy coat. Little Bear hummed a happy tune, ready to find friends and make the hill ring with laughter. Outside, the path crunched under his paws and a tiny blue blur fluttered above his shoulder. Bluebird landed with a ruffle and chirped a bright hello. Little Bear smiled and offered a crumb of his breakfast bread, which Bluebird pecked with quick, happy beeps. Together, they scouted the yard. Bluebird pointed with a bob to a sweet little hollow where a pinecone lay. They set off, Little Bear's boots making soft thumps and Bluebird singing a tinkly tune, the snow sparkling like a million tiny mirrors. Not far away, Snowy Fox was busy patting small snow lumps into shape. When Little Bear arrived, Snowy Fox tossed a soft snowball and giggled. The three friends worked side by side, stacking fluffy rounds and packing them carefully to make a snow bear with button eyes and a twig smile. Bluebird chose a shiny pebble for a nose. Little Bear's laughter made puffs in the air, and Snowy Fox's tail made gentle swirls in the snow. The new snow bear seemed to grin right back at them. Then, tucked beneath an evergreen branch, they found a small wooden sled with a playful stripe. It shone like a promise. Little Bear's paws tingled with excitement. Snowy Fox hopped on and let out a happy yip. Bluebird fluttered above, and Little Bear pushed with all his might. The sled slid and sang over the snow, carrying them toward the top of a friendly hill. They climbed and scrambled and wiggled into place, ready to whoosh. The hill seemed to lean in, eager to send them down. Away they went. The sled whooshed like wind through laundry, and laughter bubbled out of each of them. Snow sprayed like confetti, and for a wild, wonderful second, the whole world tasted only of speed and joy. Little Bear felt his tummy flip in the best possible way. At the bottom of the hill, they tumbled into a snowdrift in a flurry of giggles and soft snorts. They scrambled up, cheeks bright and eyes sparkling, and decided to climb again for another run and another round of happy whoops. After a few slides, Little Bear noticed a single sparkling snowflake twirling differently from the rest. It spun in circles like a tiny dancer and seemed to glow with its own soft light. Curious, Little Bear reached a paw and followed it as it drifted away, twirling past icicles and over frosted branches. Bluebird flitted after for a moment, but the snowflake's gentle path led Little Bear farther than he meant to go. He did not yet know he was wandering away from the friends who laughed on the hill. The snowflake guided him past a row of tall evergreens until the hill looked small behind him. Little Bear blinked and realized the sounds of sliding and laughter were very faint now. The wind sounded different here, whispering through branches and making long, quiet sighs. He paused, and his brave heart felt a tiny wobble. The sky seemed very wide. Little Bear called softly, "Snowy Fox, Bluebird." His voice puffed like a little thought in the cold air, and the forest answered only with soft echoes. Just then, a small, worried sound drifted from a hollow under a tree. Little Bear leaned closer and found Snowy Fox's paw caught beneath a drift of soft snow. Snowy Fox's ears peeped out, eyes wide and a little scared. Bluebird hovered nearby, fluttering fast but too small to push. Little Bear's worry changed into a steady, determined warmth. He remembered how Mama Bear bandaged tiny scrapes and how the red scarf could tie things together. Little Bear knew it was time to help a friend. With careful paws, Little Bear used the sled as a little shovel, scraping away at the drift. Snow flew, and his breath puffed like small clouds. Snowy Fox squeezed a paw free and gave a tiny yelp, then wriggled out with a triumphant hop. Bluebird cheered with a tiny chirpy song. They hugged, all three squishy and giggling, a warm bundle of fur and feathers. Little Bear felt proud and strong, like a moonbeam that had found its way through clouds to help a friend. They all walked back together, the hill welcoming them home like an old friend. In the distance, a gentle lantern glow bobbed. Mama Bear stood at the path with open arms, her smile wrapping around them like the coziest blanket. She led them to the little cabin where steaming cups waited, the scent of cocoa and warm bread filling the air. They talked about the snow bear, the bright sled, and the twirling snowflake, and how Little Bear had been brave and kind. Mama Bear tucked the red scarf into a safe place. That night, Little Bear snuggled into his bed with the red scarf folded on the chair and the window showing a quiet sky. Snowflakes drifted like sleepy dancers outside, each one a tiny secret. He yawned a big, satisfied yawn and thought of the day's sliding, the snow bear's crooked twig smile, and the sparkle that had led him to help a friend. He felt sleepy and full of gentle pride. Mama Bear kissed his forehead. The lantern hummed low, and Little Bear fell asleep dreaming of snowflake dances and tomorrow's small, bright adventures. The Enchanted Forest Picnic. Lily woke up with a giggle. Today was picnic day. She tucked a little picnic basket under her arm, wrapped a rainbow blanket around it, and slipped the magic pebble into her pocket like a secret. The pebble felt warm and hummed a tiny happy song only Lily could hear. She put on her red rain boots, waved goodbye to her cozy house, and skipped off toward the enchanted forest where leaves whispered hello and sunlight made polka dots on the path. Near a cluster of bluebells, Benny the bunny popped out with a cheerful hop. "Hello, Lily," Benny said, twitching his long ears and showing his tiny blue bow. He loved picnics almost as much as carrots. Lily laughed and sat down to rest. Together, they unrolled the rainbow blanket under a friendly oak. Benny offered a crunchy carrot, and Lily showed him the pebble. The pebble gave a tiny happy trill, and Benny clapped his paws in delight. Above them, Oliver the owl fluttered down from a low branch with a soft hoot. He adjusted his little spectacles and peered at the picnic. "A perfect spot for songs," he said. Soon Miri, the mole, popped up from a nearby molehill with a napkin and a tiny spoon for the berry jam jar. Everyone introduced themselves in merry whispers. The pebble hummed a tune, and the leaves shivered like clapping hands. The forest felt very pleased to have new friends gathered on its floor. Just then, the ground gave a gentle rumble, and Maple the talking tree leaned close, her leaves rustling like 1,000 tiny bells. "Welcome, little ones," she rumbled in a kind voice. "This is my favorite clearing. Share your kindness and it will shine back." The animals smiled. Lily placed the magic pebble in the center of the blanket. The pebble shivered and sent out tiny sparkles that hopped like fireflies. Everyone felt a little braver and very much loved. They opened the picnic basket together. Sandwiches with crunchy lettuce, a jar of sweet berry jam, tiny muffins, and carrot sticks spilled onto the blanket. Everyone took turns passing plates and saying what they liked best. The pebble hummed softly each time someone shared. Lily spread jam on a muffin for Benny, and Benny nudged a carrot to Miri. Little songs sprang up. Oliver tapped a wing to keep the beat, and even the leaves seemed to sway along with their gentle music. A soft drizzle began, like someone sprinkling glitter from the sky. Rosie the fox arrived with a bright leaf umbrella and her bushy tail wrapped like a cozy scarf. "Rain makes picnics magical," she said with a grin. They all huddled close, sharing the umbrella and passing tiny bites. The pebble hummed louder when a crumb was shared or a kind word said. The raindrops turned into little twinkling beads when they touched the pebble, making a gentle tinkling song that made everyone giggle. Suddenly the pebble hopped. It rolled toward a quiet puddle and shone so brightly the puddle glimmered. Then a tiny rainbow bridge rose across the water like a smiling ribbon. One by one, the friends crossed on tiptoe. Benny bounced, Miri waddled carefully, Oliver glided, Rosie trotted with a proud prance, and Lily held hands with them all. Laughter filled the air. The pebble sang a new, sparkly tune of friendship that made every step feel light and brave. When they reached the other side, a little bunny family waved hello, and a chorus of frogs hummed along to the pebble's tune. The animals shared songs and tiny dances. Maple's leaves clapped slowly like a gentle drum. Night began to tiptoe closer, sprinkling faint stars through the tree branches. The lantern was lit and cast warm, dancing light. Everyone snuggled on the rainbow blanket and listened to the pebble's lullaby, feeling safe and full of the day's tiny wonders. Before they packed up, Maple lowered a leaf and whispered, "Kindness grows here with you." Lily tucked the pebble back into her pocket, promising to remember the songs and sharing. They folded the rainbow blanket, closed the picnic basket, and carried away empty plates and happy hearts. Each friend helped tidy a little corner of the clearing so other forest visitors could find the place tidy and bright. The pebble hummed a tiny, proud note that sounded like a goodbye promise to return. Lily walked home by starlight, her red boots tapping soft beats on the path. The pebble hummed a sleep song against her chest. She waved to Maple and all her new friends and promised to come back soon with another basket and more stories. At her window, Lily tucked the pebble into a tiny dish and said, "Thank you." The pebble glowed once, like a sleepy wink. Lily fell asleep with the pebble's melody in her ears, dreaming of rainbows and songs and friends waiting in the enchanted forest. The Little Ghost Who Loved Cake. In a hush of silver moonlight, Little Ghost floated through Cozy Hollow with a happy wiggle. Little Ghost could not taste cakes, but oh, the smells made the tiny glow brighter. Cake smelled like giggles and warm hugs, sugar, vanilla, and tiny cinnamon secrets. Every night Little Ghost peeked in Greta, the cat baker's window, to watch frosting whirl and eggs and flour dance. Greta hummed soft tunes while bowls spun, and Little Ghost clapped its little ghostly hands, delighted by each plop and swirl. Greta always left her bakery window just a tiny bit open so the sweetest smells could float out to the street. Little Ghost loved to ride those smells like a kite. One evening, a soft bell rang outside the bakery door. Wibble the mouse scurried in with bright whiskers and a squeaky hello. Wibble loved crumbs and stories. Together, Wibble and Little Ghost watched Greta roll a big cake batter into tall pans. Little Ghost blinked with joy as the cake puffed up like a fluffy cloud. One night, a town notice fluttered by the bakery door. Cozy Hollow was planning a moonlight picnic for all the neighbors. "We need a very special cake," cried Wibble, eyes wide with crumbs of excitement. Little Ghost wiggled and twinkled. "I can help," thought Little Ghost, though friends knew it could not nibble a single bite. Little Ghost wanted nothing more than to make the picnic perfect for everyone, so it decided to be the helper with the brightest glow. Greta smiled and said, "We'll bake a birthday cake big as the hill." She opened a jar of sprinkles that sparkled like tiny fireworks. Little Ghost floated close, feeling proud but puzzled. "How can I help?" it asked in a whisper that sounded like a soft bell. Greta tapped a paw to her apron. "You can do what you do best, light the candles with your glow, and tell gentle jokes if any candles feel shy." Little Ghost beamed a tiny, ghostly grin. The day of the picnic arrived with the moon smiling wide. Friends carried the soft red and white checkered blanket to the hill. Greta rolled the big birthday cake onto the blanket, frosting it into clouds of white and painting stripes of rainbow inside. Little Ghost floated above and watched every ribbon of icing. Wibble danced with a tiny spoon and tried a crumb with a happy squeak. Even though Little Ghost could not taste, it felt the friends' joy bubble up like the best kind of fizz inside its glow. When Greta lifted the cake to set sugar candle stars on top, the tiniest candle refused to stay lit. "Oh dear," Greta whispered. The friends huddled close. Little Ghost floated forward and blew the gentlest of gusts that glowed warm, not a wind that would blow out candles, but a glow that made tiny flames feel brave. Each candle flickered awake, shining like a row of tiny moons. The birthday cake seemed to sigh in delight, dusted with sparkles that danced like fireflies. As everyone cheered, a sprinkle storm began not from the sky, but from Wibble's clumsy spill of the jar. Sprinkles hopped and twinkled across the blanket like confetti. Little Ghost laughed with a tinkling sound that made the sprinkles shimmer different colors. "A sprinkle dance," Greta sang, twirling a spatula. Little Ghost fluttered through the dancing sprinkles, feeling like it could taste color itself when friends smiled. The air smelled even sweeter now, with cinnamon and moon sugar that made tiny hearts skip. Just then, a little kitten from down the lane arrived late and timidly asked if there was room at the picnic. Her name was Minka and her whiskers trembled. Greta scooped her into a warm paw and said, "There's always room for one more." Little Ghost drifted nearer and wrapped a friendly glow around Minka like a soft blanket. Minka's eyes sparkled, and she purred like a little bell. Everyone at the picnic felt cozy and full of kindness, the sort of sweet that tastes like friendship. After singing a merry song, Greta carefully cut a slice of the birthday cake for each friend. Wibble nibbled, Minka purred, and Greta savored a spoonful with closed eyes. Little Ghost drifted through the feast, collecting tiny crumbs of laughter and storing them in its glow. When a shy cloud drifted over the moon, the candle flames wavered, but Little Ghost flared a little brighter, and the light came back. "Thank you," Greta said softly. "Your glow keeps the magic alive." At the end of the night, everyone lay on their backs looking up at the friendly silver moon. Little Ghost felt a warm, new feeling settle inside. Sharing made its glow feel fuller than any cake could. The moon winked as if to say, "Well done." Greta tucked the last crumbs into a tiny bag for Wibble and gave Little Ghost a flour-dusted kiss on the forehead. Wibble whispered a secret recipe for midnight muffins. They all promised to bake, share, and make picnics together again. Little Ghost drifted home that night with pockets full of laughter and a glow that hummed like a small bell. Though it never ate cake, the memory of frosting clouds and candlelight wrapped around it like a warm scarf. Under the silver moon, Little Ghost dreamed of sprinkles that sang and candles that told jokes. Every night after, Little Ghost visited Greta's window to watch new cakes rise and new friends arrive, knowing that the best flavors were kindness and shared smiles. The Midnight Fairy and the Star Dust. When the clock said midnight, the little Midnight Fairy opened her wings. The garden was silver and sleepy, and the moon hummed like a lullaby. In her pocket, she felt something small and warm. It was a jar of star dust, all twinkly and quiet. She held it up and watched specks float like tiny fireflies. The fairy smiled and whispered, "Tonight we will find one small star who needs a sparkle." Her lantern glowed softly, and she tiptoed into the dark flowers. She wandered beneath tall moonbeams and met the little moon rabbit. The rabbit had moon-shaped patches and hopped as if on soft clouds. He twitched his nose and asked, "Where are we going with a jar that sparkles?" The fairy knelt and showed him the glowing specks. "A baby star lost its shine, and we will help," she said. The rabbit wiggled his ears and decided to hop along. Together, they padded through petals that whispered good night. Far above, a sleepy cloud drifted down to listen. It hummed a low song that smelled like lavender. "I can carry you higher if you need, little ones," said the cloud in a voice like wool. The fairy thanked the cloud and set her silver lantern so it shone like a friendly moon. The rabbit climbed on the cloud's soft back, and the fairy tucked her jar beside the lantern. The sky felt snug, and the flowers below looked like tiny candles. The cloud carried them past twinkling trees until a little door appeared on a mushroom. A tiny brass key hung on a stem like a dewdrop. "Oh, a key," whispered the fairy. She used the tiny key to unlock the mushroom door and peeked inside. There was a little map that showed where the baby star might be hiding near the tallest tulip, beyond the pond of mirrors. They all held paws and wings and floats and set off, each heart full of a small, brave glow. Past the pond of mirrors, they met a playful shadow cat. At first, the cat made long, silly shadows that twirled and giggled. It jumped and tried to bat the floating stardust, scattering sparkles like confetti. "Careful," said the fairy, but she laughed because the cat's tricks were not mean. The cat led them in a little dance, and every time a sparkle landed on a flower, the flower opened a tiny, cheerful mouth to sing. The garden sounded like a bedtime parade. When the map's arrow pointed to the tallest tulip, the baby star was so small it looked like a shy pebble of light. It trembled and blinked faintly. "Oh," said the fairy softly, and she set her lantern beside the tulip so the baby star could feel brave. The rabbit hummed a soft hop hum, and the cloud tucked the tulip's leaves around it like a blanket. The star blinked a little brighter with each kind sound. It needed one gentle sprinkle to shine full. The fairy unscrewed the jar very slowly. Sparkles rose like tiny fireflies and tickled the air. She closed her eyes and hummed the moon's lullaby. Then she tipped the jar, 1, 2, 3 soft sprinkles fell like soft rain. The baby star shivered and then giggled a tiny twinkle. "Shimmer," it whispered. The rabbit clapped his paws, and the cloud blew a gentle breeze that turned the stardust into soft ribbons of light. The garden clapped too, in its own leafy way. Suddenly, the baby star popped into a bright, puffy ball of light and giggled a tiny sky giggle. It wiggled like a dandelion seed and launched gently into the air. "Goodbye, little one," they called, and the star bobbed higher and higher. The fairy waved her lantern and the rabbit hopped in a happy rhythm. The cloud puffed out a big, proud smile. Even the flowers danced as the baby star found its place between other twinkles, practicing its new sparkle. But a little gust blew the baby star the wrong way, toward a shadowy nook. Oh, the star's glow flickered small again. The fairy and friends did not worry. The shadow cat leapt, not to play this time, but to nudge the star back with a velvet paw. The cat's shadow wrapped the star like a soft glove and pushed gently. Everyone cheered when the star righted itself and rolled back toward the moon's warm, cupping hands. Even the night seemed to sigh with relief. Now the star was ready to try its brightest twinkle. The fairy sang the loudest lullaby she knew, and the sky listened. Sparkles rose from the jars and from the flowers and lifted like tiny ladders. The baby star climbed its shimmer and burst into a full, soft sparkle that made the moon wink. The pond of mirrors reflected 1,000 happy eyes. The night garden glowed like a bowl of warm candy, and everyone felt small and brave and very loved. Time felt slow and soft as the moon nodded its head. The fairy tucked the empty jar into her pocket and handed the tiny key to the rabbit to keep safe. "We did it," she whispered. The cloud hummed a sleepy tune, and the rabbit yawned the longest rabbit yawn. The shadow cat curled around a tulip like a protective friend. Little giggles and sleepy sighs drifted through the garden like tiny autumn leaves. The night promised more gentle work tomorrow. The fairy walked back under the slow moonbeams. She paused and looked up at the baby star, now shining steady and small among the others. She leaned forward and whispered, "Good night, little light. Shine bright for dreams." The star twinkled back like a tiny thank you. The garden closed its eyes. The lantern's glow dimmed to a soft heartbeat. The fairy yawned and tucked into a petal bed, dreaming of more stardust adventures to share with friends. Dawn began to tiptoe in, painting the horizon blush and gold. The fairy woke a little and smiled at the morning birds. "We helped a star and shared stardust," she hummed, brushing dew from her wings. The little moon rabbit stretched and hopped toward his burrow. The sleepy cloud floated back to its cushion in the high sky, and the shadow cat curled in the tulip bed for a tiny nap. The garden kept aglow, just in case someone else needed a sprinkle. As the day opened, the fairy kept a single speck of dust on her fingertip, like a promise. She whispered, "When night comes, we will visit again." The flowers nodded their sleepy heads, and the moon waved goodbye. The garden was very small and very big at the same time, where little things and big dreams could meet. The midnight fairy tucked her lantern away until bedtime and hummed, knowing the sky would need friends who remember to sprinkle stardust and share tiny lights. The monster under the bed's big surprise. Every night when the lights go down and the moon paints the carpet with silver stripes, Pip pulls the blanket up to the chin and listens. There is a tiny thump, a whispery rumble, then a small sound like someone counting socks. Pip thinks, what if there is a monster under the bed? This thought wiggles like a tickle. Pip imagines scary shadows, big teeth, and thunderous roars, but the house smells like warm toast and safe bedtime instead. Night after night, Pip pretends to sleep with one eye open. Little noises come from under the bed. a shuffle, a soft humming, a tiny tap like someone placing a cup. Pip listens closely and hears muffled singing, 2 notes, then 3. The singing is silly, not scary. It sounds like someone practicing a song about socks and spoons. Pip wiggles the toes and thinks, maybe a tiny friend lives there. Pip imagines what a tiny friend might like for a snack. One night, Pip decides to check. Quiet as a mouse, Pip slides off the bed and kneels down. The air smells like warm cinnamon and clean laundry. Pip leans closer and whispers, "Hello?" The whisper returns in a soft echo, "Hello, Pip." A tiny face with twinkling eyes peeks from the dark. It is not teethy or scary. It is round and furry with little horns and a shy grin. The monster says its name in a small voice, "I am Muffin." Muffin waves a sticky paw and holds a tiny paper hat. Muffin is not a scary monster at all. Muffin tiptoes in socks and collects lost things, single socks, toy spoons, tiny paper crowns. Muffin hums softly and arranges treasures on a little mat under the bed. Pip giggles. Muffin's favorite game is making a missing sock parade. Each sock gets its own drum roll and little bow. Muffin lines them up, polishes them with a puff of giggle sneeze, and gives them names like Mr. Stripe and Twinkle Toes. Pip claps so softly the moon giggles. Muffin loves parties. Tiny, quiet parties with cozy blankets and crumb-sized cakes. Muffin practices party songs all night, trying out silly words and funny drum beats with an old bottle cap. Pip listens to Muffin's careful practice and learns the chorus. Clap your paws, clap your toes, twirl your hat, and wiggle your nose. Muffin bows to an imaginary audience and blushes blue. Sometimes Muffin forgets to be quiet, and Pip laughs so hard the room shakes like a giggling jelly. Pip decides to help with the big surprise. SHHH, Pip whispers and reaches into the toy box for a paper hat. Together they fold tiny hats from the last page of a storybook. Muffin giggles and ties a tiny ribbon around a sock. The two of them color a banner with crayon stars and hang it on a string made of floss. Muffin makes a list: 1 hat, 1 sock stage, 1 soft drum, and 1 guest, Pip. Pip feels brave and excited, heart thumping like a little frog. The next night, Muffin whispers that the big surprise will happen when the clock shows sleepy 12. Pip pretends to snore with great gusto and waits. Muffin scurries. Soft feet patter on the floor, tiny lamps flicker, and the banner floats up like a shy cloud. Then Muffin taps Pip's foot. Now, Pip blinks and sees the room gently glow. Little cookie crumbs are arranged into a heart, the striped sock is on a tiny pedestal, and a paper hat sits on Teddy Bear's head. Pip feels warm all over. Suddenly, Muffin begins the party song with the practiced chorus. Pip claps paws and toes, well, hands and toes. They tap the bottle cap drum and march in a slow, wobbly parade around the bed. Muffin leads, wobbling with proud, tiny stomps while Pip hums along. The moon leans close to listen. Even Teddy Bear bounces his stitched knee. Outside, the color of the night seems to hum along in soft blues and sleepy pinks. The room feels like a giggle wrapped in a blanket. At the end of the parade, Muffin presents the biggest surprise of all. Muffin hands Pip a tiny box tied with a crumbly ribbon. Inside is the missing sock, clean, starry, and smiling as if it had been on a very good trip. Pip blinks and hugs the sock to the chest. Muffin says, "I found it on the laundry line road." Pip laughs and thanks Muffin with the biggest, slobbery hug a tiny person can give. Muffin blushes teal and giggles until the giggles turn to sleepy yawns. Morning comes with a gentle tippy-tap of sunlight. Pip wakes with a smile and sees the banner drooping like a sleepy flower and the tiny hats in a cozy pile. The sock sits proudly on the bedside table. Pip tells the family about the monster under the bed. Pip's voice is bright and brave. Muffin is my friend. The family laughs, brings a muffin, real, sweet, and warm for the tiny guest, and helps Pip leave a small note by the bed that says, "Thank you, Muffin." Muffin peeks out one last time, shy and proud. Muffin leaves quietly when the house is awake, carrying tiny crumbs and a little bundle of giggle dust. Pip waves and promises to visit every night. Sometimes they leave a single cookie on the mat, and sometimes a crayon drawing. The house keeps both secrets and smiles. Pip learns that not every monster is scary. Some are helpers of lost things, keepers of quiet parties, and best of all, friends who love tiny surprises. That night, as Pip pulls the blanket tight and the moon hums outside the window, Pip feels a soft bump under the bed, the sound of socks practicing their bows. Pip smiles wide and whispers into the pillow, "Good night, Muffin." Under the bed, a small voice answers sleepily, "Good night, Pip." The big surprise was not that a monster lived there, but that the monster was a friend with party plans, kind paws, and a very good memory for missing socks. Pip drifts to sleep on a cloud of giggles. The secret message in a bottle. Maya loved mornings by the sea. She put on her stripy sun hat, grabbed Biscuit's leash, and walked to the wide, warm sand where the waves whispered. Today the shore smelled like salt and oranges, and little crabs popped like dots in the sand. Something bobbed near the tide line, a glass bottle with a tiny glow inside. Maya crouched, Biscuit sniffed and wagged his short tail, and together they reached for the bottle as if reaching for a secret friend waiting to be met. Maya picked up the bottle and wiped sand from its smooth glass. Inside, like a little sleeping star, was a rolled paper tied with silver seaweed. The cork came out with a small pop and a sprinkle of glitter. Biscuit barked once, excited and proud, and Maya unrolled the paper very slowly. Tiny drawings danced across the page, a heart-shaped rock, a wavy line of shells, and a little shining dot with an arrow. It looked like a map, but the drawings seemed to giggle when she looked at them. The paper had a secret message written in tiny star letters. It said, "Follow the silver dots, help a shy friend, bring a little light." Maya whispered the words aloud, and Biscuit tilted his head as if listening. The map pointed to a heart-shaped rock not far away, so Maya put the bottle into her bag and they began to hop along the warm sand. Every step made a tiny drum beat. Maya hummed, Biscuit pranced, and the sea seemed to watch like a friendly giant with gentle eyes. When they reached the heart-shaped rock, a white seagull swooped down and landed with one wing tucked, as if saying hello. "Hello, I'm Swoosh," he called in a cheerful voice and tipped his head. Swoosh had seen many tides and many bottles, and he decided he would come along. He pointed his beak toward a shallow tide pool where shells lay like small moons. The map's silver dots shimmered like a secret path across the sand. Maya clapped softly. She liked that the adventure had a friend to help. At the tide pool, small waves sighed and showed colorful stones. A crab with a shiny red shell waved a claw and led them toward a tiny hollow beneath a clump of seaweed. There, whispered Swoosh, and the little hollow gleamed. Inside lay a small folded piece of paper that looked very old. When Maya opened it, the paper breathed a faint silver light. The moonbeam map. It made little sparkles in the air like fireflies, showing a curving line to a hidden cove guarded by a smiling palm tree. They followed the moonbeam map along a path of shells, hopping over little dunes and stepping around sleepy seaweed piles. Sometimes Maya danced in the sand, and Biscuit chased his own shadow. Swoosh flew ahead to check the way and came back bringing tiny sea-scented stories. The sun played peekaboo with a few clouds, and everything felt like a game that only 3 brave friends could play. The silver dots on the map glowed a bit brighter as if cheering them on. Soon they reached a little cove where a tiny island sat like a green bump in the blue, and a small palm tree smiled at the sky. Palm Tree Pete waved his leaves like friendly hands and shaded a cozy nook where the sand was soft. There, tucked in a circle of shells, was a glowing ripple, a small fish no bigger than Maya's hand, shimmering like moonlight on water. The fish blinked with shy silver eyes and trembled a little, as if it had been waiting for very kind helpers. The little fish sighed a tiny bubble and sent another soft glow. "I am Glimmer," it whispered in ripple sounds. "I lost my way to the deep blue where my friends sleep. I get afraid in shallow puddles." Maya knelt and cupped her hands gently. She wrapped a small wet shell around the fish like a blanket and promised she would help. Biscuit pressed his nose gently to the water's edge, and Swoosh unfurled a plan that sounded very important and very funny all at once. They built a tiny, shiny path of shells and sea glass that led from the cove to the edge of the sea, arranging them like stepping stones the fish could follow in the water. Maya hummed a soft song and Swoosh kept watch from above. Biscuit fetched a smooth shell now and then, proud as a helper. The moonbeam map's silver dots winked as if to say, "Yes, that is the way." Little by little, the water grew deeper and the path glowed brighter, helping Glimmer feel braver. When the path reached the gentle surf, Glimmer trembled one last time and then swam forward, leaving a tiny sparkling trail like a silver kite. The deeper water hugged the fish in welcome. Then, pop! A ripple darted back and left a small pearly gift at Maya's feet. It was a little pearl, warm and humming with gratitude. Glimmer circled once and flicked a thankful shimmer that made the bottle in Maya's bag sparkle, as if it, too, was smiling. The map's secret message now glowed softly on the paper. Kindness finds its way when friends follow the dots. Maya tucked the little pearl into her small palm and felt it warm like a tiny sun. Biscuit wagged so fast his tail was a blur, and Swoosh flew loops as if doing a happy dance. They all cheered in soft voices so the sea would not wake anyone else, and Palm Tree Pete waved his leaves like a sleepy friend saying, "Well done." Before the sun slid down, Maya put the empty, sparkly bottle back on the sand with a new note inside. She wrote in big, careful letters, "Thank you, friends. We helped Glimmer go home. Pass it on." Then she tied it with a little seaweed bow and corked it softly. Biscuit gave a triumphant bark, and Swoosh helped push the bottle so it bobbed out to sea with a tiny silver wake. The bottle glittered like a message full of smiles and set off to find someone else who needed help. As evening painted the sky in pink and blue, Maya and Biscuit walked home with sandy toes and pockets of small shells. Maya held the little pearl safe and whispered a promise to keep helping. She knew the bottle would carry their story somewhere else, maybe to a child with a lost toy or an animal that needed a friend. That night, tucked into bed, Maya placed the warm pearl on her bedside shelf so she could remember how even tiny hands can make big kindnesses. Sometimes, when the moon was a silver pebble, Maya could hear a soft thump at her window, a tiny wave sound that felt like a friend saying hello. She would smile and think of the day the bottle glowed, the map winked, and a shy fish found its way. The secret message in the bottle had been more than paper. It had been an idea that kindness travels on and on, like a little boat across the sea. Maya fell asleep knowing tomorrow might bring another tiny adventure. The Little Witch's First Spell. Leela the Little Witch lived in a cozy, crooked cottage at the top of a friendly hill. Her hat was a little patchwork of purple and soft blue, and her braids stuck out like a question mark because she had been thinking all afternoon. Tonight the moon looked like a warm pancake in the sky, and Leela sat at her tiny round table with Pip the cat purring on her lap. She had a spell book, a small velvet pouch of star dust, and a tiny broom that wobbled when it laughed. Leela had never cast a spell before. Her heart felt like a little drum. She was ready to try. Pip blinked his golden eyes and nudged the tiny velvety pouch toward Leela. The pouch made a soft giggle like a sleepy bell, and a sprinkle of tiny sparkles tickled Leela's fingers. She opened the spell book. The pages hummed and flicked like a friendly bird. Words looked like little ribbons, and there was a song rhyme that promised gentle light and a dancing lantern if you blew softly and meant kind things. Leela practiced the rhyme under her breath, tasting the gentle sounds like candy. Pip purred encouragement, and the broom gave a tiny twitch. Outside, the moon watched with a buttery smile while the little hedgehog snuffled at the doorstep, curious. Leela practiced blowing on a single sparkle, whispering the rhyme the book suggested. Her voice was gentle and funny sweet. The broomstick leaned closer as if to listen. Nothing big happened at first, only a tiny shiver of light and a soft giggle from the pouch, but Leela felt proud. Being small and careful felt like a kind of magic, too. Pip danced his paws on the table, impatient for the sparkles to do something more. On her third try, Leela took a deep breath, tipped the little pouch, and let a whispering handful of star dust float out. The sparkles hopped like tiny frogs and caught the rhyme in the air. The spell book hummed louder, and one brave sparkle zipped to the broom tassels and made them tingle. Pip meowed with delight, and the broom gave a surprised little sneeze of dust. A tiny paper lantern on the shelf trembled, then lifted a whisker and floated up like it had been waiting for a friend. Leela clapped, surprised and delighted. The little lantern bobbed and hummed, glowing warm and orange like a friendly firefly. It brushed the moonlight and left tiny glittery footprints in the air. Leela laughed because it sounded like a tiny bell, and Pip chased a floating sparkle that looped like a ribbon. The hedgehog watched with wide eyes and a brave snuffle, thinking maybe this was the best evening for a snack and a spectacle. Leela whispered new parts of the rhyme, trying to guide the lantern gently. The cottage filled with gentle light and hopeful sounds. Emboldened, Leela tried a bigger breath and a kinder line from the book. The lantern listened like a puppy, and two more papers on the shelf rose to join the dance, twirling above the table. The broom laughed so hard it nearly toppled, and Pip spun a little somersault on the tablecloth. Leela's voice grew steady as she counted the rhyme like a little song, soft, strong, and gentle. Every word made the lanterns sway in a kindly parade. Tonight the cottage looked like a tiny festival lit by Leela's careful magic. The moon seemed to clap with twinkling light. Even the trees hummed a soft tune. Leela felt like she could make gentleness float across the whole hill. Pip pranced in circles, and the broom did a silly little waltz. The lanterns drifted over the window and out toward the willow tree, painting long shadows like friendly fingers. Leela felt proud and a little dizzy with excitement as the magic she had read about became real right before her eyes. Her spell sounded like a lullaby the whole valley could hear. But one lantern, cheekier than the rest, decided to explore the willow branches too closely. It tumbled into the leaves and got tangled in a cozy knot, humming in a worried little voice. Leela's stomach did a tiny flip. The rhyme she knew was gentle, but now something needed bravery and thought. The moon watched, its smile turned curious, and Pip hissed a small, hurried hiss as if to say, "We must help." The hedgehog snuffled forward, suddenly very brave and very ready to help a floating friend. Leela took another deep breath, this one steadier, with kindness tucked into it like a secret. She opened the book to a different page and read a softer rhyme about patience and help. The words were slow and round, like warm soup. Pip rubbed against the lantern's ribbon, trying to soothe it, while the hedgehog gave a polite little snuffle that somehow untangled a ribbon knot. The broom leaned its handle down to offer a steady perch. Leela felt braver with friends by her side and kept whispering the new, careful rhyme. Slowly, the lantern stopped trembling, and its little hum turned into a thankful trill. Leela said the rhyme again, softer and steadier, and the lantern floated free with a tiny bow as if to say thank you. The willow leaves tapped like applause, and the moon gave a big buttery grin. Leela hugged Pip and the hedgehog, cheeks warm and proud. The cottage glowed with gentle lantern music, and Leela realized that magic could tidy mistakes when you used your words and your heart together. Everyone sighed happy and tired sighs. After the rescue, Leela sat very still and wrote a tiny note in the back of her spell book. "Be patient, be kind, breathe slow." She tied a little star sticker beside it and kept the pouch of star dust closed for a gentle nap. Pip curled into a sleepy bun on the broom's crooked handle, and the hedgehog found a warm sock for a nest. Leela smiled because she had learned a new kind of magic, fixing things with friends, calm words, and a steady breath. It felt like the best kind of spell. Night hummed all around the cottage like a sleepy tune. Leela made a tiny pot of moon tea, sweet and warm, and shared it with her friends on the doorstep. They sipped quietly under the smiling moon, which seemed to puff little stars like popcorn. Pip told a silent story with his tail, and the hedgehog snuffled a happy snack. Leela felt proud and cozy. Her first spell turned out to be a lesson wrapped in giggles and small heroic acts. The hill felt safer than before, full of gentle light and tiny promises. Before bed, Leela tucked the spell book under her pillow and hummed the rhyme she had learned, the one about kindness and breath. Her hat slid over one eye like a sleepy curtain. The broom leaned gently by the window, and Pip gave one last stretch and a purr like a tiny engine. Outside, lanterns bobbed like sleepy friends returning to rest. Leela swallowed a yawn and felt a brave kind of tired, the sort that grows after you try something big and do your best. She whispered, "Tomorrow I will try more," and the moon winked back. Leela dreamed of new gentle spells, one to help lost mittens find their owners, another to make soup sing when someone is sad. Pip chased dream sparkles shaped like fish, and the hedgehog dreamed of brave leaf boats. In the morning, Leela opened the spell book again and found tiny footprints of sparkles near the note she had left. The book hummed as if to say, "You did well." Leela grinned and tucked a star sticker onto the page. Practice, she thought, and gentle courage were the best kinds of magic. Word of the little lantern parade spread softly through the valley like warm bread smell. Neighbors waved from downstairs windows and left tiny thank you notes on Leela's gate. The moon stayed, always friendly, and at night more lanterns sometimes drifted by just to say hello. Leela practiced her rhymes a little every day, and sometimes she made tiny lights for someone who felt lonely. Magic, she learned, was not only in sparkles, but in the courage to try and in the care to fix what went wrong with gentle hands. On the hill, the cottage glowed softer each night, a little beacon of practice and patience. Children of the valley told stories of the small witch who tried her first spell and learned how to be brave when things wobbled. Leela liked the stories because they sounded like the rhyme she read, calm, bright, and full of room for mistakes that turned into lessons. Pip would puff with pride, and the broom would wobble happily at every retelling. The hedgehog became a favorite helper and got a name, Nuzzle, because of the way he liked to nuzzle trouble into neatness. Years later, Leela would remember her first spell with a silly, fond whisper. She would write the rhyme at the front of the book so she never forgot how a gentle voice and a steady breath could calm a floating thing. But tonight, she was only just learning, and that was perfect. She kissed Pip on his head, patted Nuzzle's brave snout, and turned the little pouch so it could rest and giggle softly in its sleep. The moon tucked the whole hill beneath a cozy blanket of stars, and Leela's first spell slept, too soft, mended, and waiting for tomorrow. The magical door at midnight. Mia woke to a tiny knock, tap, tap, just when the clock whispered 12. She sat up in her cozy bed and blinked at the floor. There, tucked under the quilt and near her slippers, was a little wooden door no taller than her favorite storybook. It shimmered with a soft golden light and hummed like a lullaby. Mia smiled with the slow excitement of someone who knows a secret might be kind. She slipped on her fuzzy socks and whispered, "Hello." When the little door opened, a small head peeked out, Toby the turtle, eyes bright like green marbles, and a tiny lantern mouse with a glowing lamp. They bowed as if greeting a long-lost friend. "Would you like to visit the midnight market?" Toby asked in a voice that sounded like slow giggles. Mia's heart felt like a fluffy balloon. She nodded, tugging the quilt around her shoulders like a cape. The doorway smelled faintly of honey and the sea. Stepping through, Mia found a path of twinkling stones leading into a gentle night garden. Above, the crescent moon tilted like a friendly smile and sprinkled moonbeams that felt like soft ribbons. A star carpet waited, pillows of dandelion fluff tucked at its corners. Mia climbed aboard with one careful hop. Toby crawled beside her, tiny feet tapping. The lantern mouse lit the way. The path hummed under them, and Mia felt safe and brave in a new quiet world. They drifted toward the midnight market, where tents glowed like jellyfish and stalls sold music in jars. Friendly creatures strolled with pockets full of giggles. A baker sold warm cinnamon clouds, a painter sold pictures that hummed, and a seamstress stitched tiny dreams into mitten-sized pockets. Mia smelled sugar and willow smoke. Children of the night owl babies with sleepy eyes clapped and waved as the star carpet floated over the smiling crowd. Everything sparkled kindly. At the Moonlight stall, Mia met the crescent moon's own helper, who offered small moonbeams bundled like ribbons. "Take one to share a smile," the helper whispered. Mia unwrapped a silver ribbon and felt it giggle in her hand. She looped a moonbeam into her hair and it warmed her like a soft blanket. The lantern mouse's whiskers twitched. Toby's shell glowed brighter. Mia promised to use the moonbeam to help anyone who looked a little dim. Soon they sailed on a fluffy dandelion float through a stream of giggling clouds. Puffy cloud kites waved hello as they passed. Fireflies played hide-and-seek among the petals of the sky, and each tiny light left a soft print as if someone had stamped glow on the air. Mia and Toby reached out to touch the prints, and each touch made a gentle bell sound. They laughed until their chests felt like soft springs of joy. In a shadowed nook by a willow stall, they found a little grumpy shadow who had lost its smile. It shuffled and sighed like a lost hat. The shadow was soft and small, but hollow where cheer should be. Other visitors passed carefully, not knowing how to help. Mia knelt and touched the shadow's hand. She unwrapped her moonbeam ribbon and tied it into a tiny bow. The moonbeams tickled, and the shadow tried a smile. It trembled, then bubbled into a bright grin. The newly smiling shadow joined a small parade led by sleepy owls tapping leaf drums. Toby marched with a tiny leaf drum too, his shell gleaming like polished green glass. Mia clapped in time and stomped one soft slipper. Beat, beat, hush, and the crowd hummed along. The parade tucked the happy shadow into a pocket of laughter, and the market swelled with giggles like warm soup. Mia felt proud and sleepy in a comfortable, helpful way. The moon whispered that dawn would be near and that star carpets prefer to rest before morning birds wake. Mia's heart gave a little skip. She didn't want the night to end, but she knew home waited too. The moon handed Mia a small bell that sounded like a giggle and a paper map woven from stardust. "For kind footsteps and brave pockets," the moon said with a wink. Mia tucked the gifts safely into her pajamas pocket. On the way back, the market hummed a slow lullaby. People yawned and tents lowered like sleepy heads. The star carpet drifted through the twinkling stone path toward the tiny door beneath Mia's bed. The lantern mouse curled into a nap on Mia's shoulder, and Toby yawned a turtle-sized yawn that sounded like a tiny tide. Mia pressed the little bell once. It chimed with a soft giggle that seemed to tuck the world into a blanket. Back in her bedroom, the tiny door closed with a kissing click and left a sprinkle of moon dust on Mia's pillow. She climbed under the quilt, the star map warm in her pocket and the giggling bell tucked by her hand. Toby curled up like a small green pebble on the quilt edge, and the lantern mouse found a corner of the sock drawer to keep watch. Outside the window, the sky blushed faintly as dawn yawned, but the room stayed cozy and bright with moon crumbs. Mia hugged her new map and bell and whispered thank you to the small night friends. She promised to return when the door sang again. The lantern mouse squeaked a tiny goodnight, and Toby blinked slow, turtle shore. Mia closed her eyes and felt the moonbeam ribbon like a warm hug. In dreams, she floated back to the market where she helped others and laughed with clouds. The house kept its secret, and the little door waited, patient as sleep. Outside, the crescent moon dipped behind cottony clouds and the sky grew paler, but the tiny door at the foot of Mia's bed kept a faint twinkle like a secret smile. As Mia's breathing softened into sleep, a tiny knock, tap, tap, no louder than a kitten's paw, sounded once more and then faded. The night had been full of new friends, small brave moments, and shiny little gifts of kindness. Mia slept, dreaming of moonbeams, sure that adventures would come back again. The Invisible Friends Club. Mia had a garden that smelled like dirt and sunshine. One morning, she found a crayon and a piece of cardboard and drew a special sign, Invisible Friends Club. She taped the sign to a low branch so neighbors could not see it. Mia clapped and waited. She did not mind that only she seemed to know where the club was. The garden felt like a secret room where the grass listened and the breeze nodded hello. Mia whispered a welcome and sang a tiny hello song. She stuck her tongue out at a beetle and bowed to a ribbon on the fence. Then she tapped the sign with 2 fingers to start club time. She always had a plan: be kind, share, and keep the secret. The rules were simple, written in crayon heart shapes. The garden listened, and the sign swayed like a small yes. The first friend to arrive was Whisk, an invisible cat who loved to purr like the rumble of a small engine. Mia felt a warm brush against her knee and knew it was Whisk. She giggled and held out an empty hand for a high five, and the air did a tiny tickle. Whisk liked nap sunspots and soft socks. Mia told Whisk about the sign and the rules, and the cat answered with a happy, whispery purr. Next came Flit, a tiny invisible bird who sang glittery notes that tickled Mia's ear. Flit zipped and twirled, leaving little sparkles like dandelion dust. Mia opened her hands so Flit could land on the tips of her fingers, and the bird chirped a funny tune. Flit loved to whistle the same short song every time someone laughed. Mia clapped and learned the song too, and their giggles made butterflies fly in her belly. Glow arrived at dusk like a friendly lantern, a small round light that hummed a cozy hum. Glow liked to hover close to faces and warm noses on chilly evenings. Mia cupped her hands and let Glow rest between her palms, feeling a gentle heat that made her hands smell like sugar. Glow did not speak words, but hummed songs that made the garden feel like a blanket. Mia listened and felt braver with that tiny light near her heart. Pebble rolled up next, not by hopping, but by nudging itself under a leaf. Pebble was small, round, and patient, and it liked to tell stories about soil and roots. Mia sat very still and listened to Pebble's quiet tales about the ground's sleepy work. Pebble never hurried. When Mia felt fidgety, Pebble reminded her to breathe slow, like a tiny tide. Mia tucked Pebble into her pocket for safekeeping and felt steady all afternoon. Mia wrote the club rules with thick crayon letters and drew hearts around them. Rule 1, be kind. Rule 2, share snacks and stories. Rule 3, listen with more than ears. they practiced a secret handshake that looked like clapping and blowing a tiny kiss to the sky. Each handshake ended with a hug of pretend air. The rules made Mia and her friends feel safe, like a warm blanket tied with ribbon. They played hide-and-seek with giggles that sound like pebbles skipping. Mia covered her eyes and counted slowly while Whisk and Flit tumbled between blades of grass. Glow blinked to signal where one friend might be, and Pebble stayed by the sign to keep watch. When Mia found someone, she squealed with a tiny burst of joy. Even invisible friends made good hiding places, and even better, finding them felt like discovering new stars. For their picnic, Mia laid a small checkered cloth and set out empty plates and little cups. They shared make-believe sandwiches that tasted like sunshine and rainbows. Mia poured pretend tea that smelled of mint and giggles. Whisk nuzzled a napkin, Flit fluttered glitter onto the crust, Glow warmed the cups, and Pebble sat politely near the picnic basket. They ate invisible treats and felt full of happiness anyway. A soft rain began to fall, and Mia opened a bright polka dot umbrella. Whisk shook raindrops off his invisible whiskers, and Flit fluffed invisible wings. Glow glowed braver to keep the ground from getting dark. Mia noticed a tiny beetle trembling on a leaf and used the umbrella to shelter the bug. Everyone helped in their small way. The rain sounded like a drum roll, and together they made a shelter of kindness so the beetle could rest. One afternoon, Whisk grew quiet and did not answer when Mia called his name. Mia listened for purrs, but the garden hummed softly instead. She checked Whisk's favorite sunspot and the soft sock corner, but the place felt empty like a pocket with no coin. Mia's heart thumped like a small drum. She sat down and thought of what Whisk loved: sunny naps, soft songs, and Mia's silly voices. Mia worried, but she remembered their rules: be kind, share, and listen with more than ears. Mia whispered Whisk's favorite silly song and tapped the ground where the cat liked to nap. She asked Flit and Glow and Pebble to help. Flit sang a tiny high note, Glow blinked in steady rhythm, and Pebble told a calm story about roots holding on. Mia held her breath and hummed. The garden listened, and the wind tucked itself close. Mia did not cry. She sang louder, reaching into the quiet like stretching a hand into a pocket. Suddenly, the ground shivered and a faint shimmer curled out of a sunbeam. Whisk returned as a silver sigh, a soft outline that twined around Mia's legs. Mia laughed so loud it sounded like bells. Whisk rubbed against her ankle and purred with happiness. The invisible friend was back because everyone had been patient and kind. Light and song had found a small, shy heart and drawn it home again. They celebrated by marching around the garden, each friend making a funny face. Mia led with a tiny paper crown made from a leaf and ribbon. Whisk pranced with invisible paws, Flit did loops in the air, Glow lit a twinkling trail, and Pebble clacked a meeting together rhythm on the picnic cloth. Laughter spilled like lemonade, and everyone felt the club's promise grow like the tallest dandelion puff. Mia learned that invisible friends could be quiet when they felt shy, hungry for a nap, or thinking big thoughts. She learned to leave gentle notes and soft songs near their favorite places. Sometimes she sat very still and waited. Sometimes she drew pictures and left them under a leaf so friends could find them in their own time. Patience became another rule for the club, written in tiny crayon letters with a heart underneath. For a new game, They made friendship bracelets from twine, tiny leaves, and a ribbon. Mia looped a leaf around her wrist and tied a small knot with help from Flit's quick wing sparkles and Glow's soft light. Whisk watched from a curled spot, and Pebble sat steady so nothing rolled away. Each bracelet had a little not quite visible thread that only club members could touch. Mia felt proud and important wearing her tiny leaf-and-ribbon promise. When the sun slid down the sky, Glow shone brighter to light the way. Mia held Glow carefully so it would not get tired. The garden colors softened to sleepy blues and amber. Birds sang the last little songs, and the crickets tuned up their tiny violins. Glow hummed a lullaby, and Mia hummed back. It felt like a gentle blanket wrapping the whole club in safe gold light before bedtime. Mia tucked her friends into cozy places, Whisk into a sock by the shoe pile, Flit into a hair ribbon, Pebble in a little pocket, and Glow into a jar with holes for air. She left the club sign folded beside the bed and slipped a bracelet under her pillow as a secret promise. Mia whispered thank you to each friend and closed her eyes, feeling safe with invisible arms tucked around her like soft clouds. That night, Mia dreamed that the club traveled to the moon on a paper boat, with Glow lighting the way and Flit singing lullabies. Whisk curled into a comet tail, and Pebble told quiet stories about moon dust. In her dream, everything felt safe, and Mia woke with a sunflower smile. She knew the Invisible Friends Club would wait while she napped, and that love could be gentle even when you could not see it. In the morning, Mia ran to the garden with a new crayon and drew a tiny badge, a leaf tied with ribbon. She slid the badge under her pillow and promised to always listen, wait, and play with kindness. The club sign still swayed on the branch, and the garden hummed with secret promise. Mia opened her arms wide as if to hug the whole world. Then she skipped inside to find crumbs for an imaginary feast and a friend for every corner. Every day the club had new small adventures. Sometimes they painted pebble faces, sometimes they built leaf boats, and sometimes they sang very serious songs about socks and buttons. Mia learned that invisible friends could be helpers, listeners, and the very best spot for secrets. She taught her friends songs, and they taught her to be patient. The garden grew with them like a kind, old friend with deep, grassy pockets to hide treasures in. Sometimes Mia met other children at the fence and told them about the most important rule: be kind, even to things you cannot see. Some children smiled and pretended, which made the club bigger in their imaginations. Others simply listened and nodded, and that was enough. Mia always left room for secrets and quiet thinking, because invisible friends liked places to be shy. She learned that sharing did not have to mean losing the specialness of the club. It could make it sparkle more. One evening, Mia wrote a tiny book of club stories with crayon pictures and folded it into a pocket-sized treasure. She read the stories aloud to her invisible friends and to the moon, which blinked slow and pleased. The stories were small, about a cat who loved socks, a bird who sang at noon, a light that could hum softly, and a pebble who told tales of roots. Each story ended with a promise: we will wait for each other and keep kind hearts. Before long, the Invisible Friends Club was as important as a big, warm blanket on a chilly day. Mia kept the badge under her pillow, the sign on the branch, and the little rules tied in her pocket. Whenever she felt lonely, she tapped the sign and the friends came back, sometimes as whispers, sometimes as sparkles, and sometimes as a warm sunspot on her shoe. Mia knew magic was not only in big things, it lived in small habits and friendly promises. At bedtime, Mia put on her leaf and ribbon bracelet and whispered a final secret goodnight. The garden breathed out and the stars listened. Whisk purred like the end of a long song, Flit tucked sparkles into Mia's hair, Glow blinked slowly until it looked like a tiny moon, and Pebble hummed a slow, steady note. Mia closed her eyes and felt hands of the invisible friends around her heart. She slept knowing she belonged to something gentle and true. And if you ever find a crayon, a quiet patch of garden, or a folded sign under a branch, Mia would invite you to imagine a club of your own. You might meet a friend who purrs like wind, a bird that sprinkles sparkles, a light that hums, or a pebble that tells stories. The Invisible Friends Club waits in small places where kindness sits and whispers hello. All you need is a little patience, a gentle heart, and a promise to be kind. The Puppy Who Chased Rainbows. Pip was a small, bouncy puppy with golden fur that glittered when he shook. One morning, after a soft spring shower, Pip looked out the kitchen window and gasped. High in the sky, a bright, curvy rainbow arched from tree to tree. Pip's tail began to wag like a metronome. He had never seen such colors shimmer together, and in his puppy heart, a daring idea grew. He would chase that rainbow and see where the colors lived. Pip darted out the back door into Grandma Mabel's garden. The air smelled of damp earth and flower petals. Grandma Mabel stood near the herb row, apron on, and she laughed when she saw Pip racing by with muddy paws. She waved and called, "Be careful, little one." Pip only barked happily and raced toward the bright curve of color, thinking the rainbow must be close. He skipped over stepping stones and chased each shimmer like a bouncing toy. A small bluebird named Bee fluttered down from a branch and landed on the garden fence. She tilted her head and sang a curious chirp. "You can't catch a rainbow, Pip," Bee trilled. Pip cocked his head and blinked with big, round eyes. That answer made him more determined, not less. "I will try," he yipped, and off he bounded, Bee chirping overhead. Together, they left the garden path and leapt into green grass that tickled Pip's paws. Across a little wooden bridge they went, where a happy frog named Flip croaked hello from a lily pad. Flip wore a tiny green smile and popped up to say, "Where you going? Pip." Pip wagged and pointed with his nose toward the glowing arch. Flip stretched and leaped with a playful splash, happy to come along. The trio trotted past sun-warmed stones and puddles that winked like mirrors, each puddle puzzled by Pip's hopeful nose. The path led to a meadow where clover grew soft as cushions. Colors seemed to hum there, the rainbow's bottom kneed close to the ground, winking like a shy friend. Pip ran faster, paws thumping the soft earth. Bee zipped between wildflowers, her tiny wings flicking ruby and sapphire shadows. Flip hopped from blossom to blossom, delighted. Pip jumped and leaped, feeling he might jump so high the rainbow would finally let him touch its colors. Pip made a big, brave leap and pawed at the air. For a heartbeat, colors seemed to tremble. A warm, friendly sun peeked out from the clouds and smiled down, bathing Pip in golden light. But the rainbow shimmered and slid like light on a bubble. Pip landed in a soft tumble of grass and giggled. Though his paws barely touched color, the thrill of trying felt like discovering a new kind of game, one that laughed and ran as much as he did. Near the meadow's edge, under a willow that swayed like a sleepy curtain, Pip found a puddle that wasn't like the others. It reflected the sky in colors so bright it hummed a tiny tune. Pip peered in and saw the rainbow ripple back at him. He poked the water with a curious nose. The puddle tickled, and the reflection winked. Off came a tiny sprinkle of color sparks that danced on Pip's whiskers and made him sneeze a happy puppy sneeze. The puddle giggled like a tiny bell and sent up a ring of color sparks that floated around Pip. Bee hopped down to peck a spark on Pip's nose. Flip tried to catch a sparkle with a quick frog jump. The spark smelled faintly like sunshine and tasted like giggles. Pip rolled and chased them in a merry tumble, each spark bursting into a soft pop of color that made the meadow smell sweeter. The rainbow had given Pip a gift, pieces of color to play with. Suddenly, the sky let out a soft, sprinkle song and tiny raindrops began to fall again. They tapped the leaves like a lullaby, and each raindrop made the little color sparks shimmer into teeny rainbows that danced around Pip's ears. Pip shook himself like a small windmill and watched the droplets scatter in 1,000 tiny arcs. The meadow became a twinkling place where many small rainbows lived close to the ground and near each friendly nose. Pip paused and breathed in the moist, sweet air. He realized something soft and new. While the faraway rainbow arched high and proud, these little rainbow boughs at his paws were bright, real, and close. He could sniff them, nudge them, and sit inside their tiny glow. Pip nosed a little rainbow into a sunbeam and watched it warm like a cookie. He barked a delighted puppy bark, because this kind of rainbow was all around him when he stopped to look. At that moment, Grandma Mabel found them, wiping muddy hands on her apron and smiling wide. She wrapped a soft towel around Pip's damp fur and hummed a cozy tune. "Did you find the rainbow, Pip?" she asked. Pip pressed his nose into the towel and wagged, bursting little happy yips. Grandma Mabel scooped him up for a gentle cuddle and offered tiny warm biscuits for everyone. The friends sat together, sharing biscuits, stories, and the glow of small colors. Grandma Mabel hummed, then carefully painted a paper kite with all the colors they had seen: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Pip sat very still, watching the brush make swirls and stripes. Bee peeped approvingly and Flip clapped his small frog hands. When the kite was ready, Grandma Mabel tied a string safe around Pip's collar so he could carry the kite as they walked. Pip felt proud and important, like the leader of color. They walked back to the meadow and Grandma Mabel let the kite soar. The paper bird bobbed and danced, and as it climbed, stripes of paint fluttered like tiny rainbows of its own. Pip trotted along with the string in his mouth, prancing proudly as the wind lifted the colors high. Bees hummed around the flowers and Bee sang. Flip hopped in the sunshine, eyes closed, smiling. Pip felt the colors trail behind him like a happy tail. As the kite climbed, it seemed to scoop up the sky and carry a handful of color back down toward them. Little flakes of painted brightness drifted like confetti and settled softly on Pip's head and on Grandma Mabel's apron. Pip pranced in a slow, happy circle, feeling as if he had caught pieces of the rainbow after all, not the whole arch, but color that filled his paws and heart. Laughter bubbled up from everyone, ringing like tiny bells. When the sun began to lower, the rainbow dimmed into a soft promise across the clouds. Pip curled into Grandma Mabel's lap, tired but glad. He thought about the big rainbow he had chased and all the little rainbows he had found. The puddles' sparkles, the tiny bows in the rain, the painted kites' flakes, and the warm colors of friends' smiles. He realized chasing had led him to more joy than catching ever could. Joy lived in the journey itself. Grandma Mabel carried Pip inside, towel dry and warm, while Bee tucked into a cozy nest, and Flip found a damp, comfy leaf to rest on. Pip's last puppy thoughts before sleep were twinkling pictures of all the colors he had sniffed and chased. He dreamed small rainbows that fit in his paws and big rainbow arcs that he would watch from a safe, loving lap. In his sleep, he chased colors gently and woke with a smile. Morning came and Pip woke with a little yawn, happy as a sunflower. He trotted to the window and saw a faint arc high and thin in the far sky. Pip's tail thumped, but this time he sat quietly and watched the rainbow turn the morning light into gentle color. He knew now that rainbows were not things to catch, but songs to follow, stories to share, and bright pieces of every day. Pip wagged, ready for new little adventures.